Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a bit immersive. Forget cozy bedtime tales of kittens for now. Strap in, or rather, unstrap your sandals, because we're time traveling you straight into the heart of the late Roman Empire. Specifically, you're landing smack in the middle of Emperor Diocletian's grand plan to save the whole shebang. Spoiler alert, it doesn't end well, and honestly, you might not survive the first week. Think massive bureaucracy, confusing chains of command, and the distinct feeling that the empire is being held together with spit, baling wire, and sheer imperial willpower. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment below too, tell me what city you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Okay. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. The dusty air of Antioch hits you like a warm, gritty towel. You blink, trying to adjust to the harsh Mediterranean sun after the stuffy confines of the recruitment office, a glorified shed, really. In your hand is a small, surprisingly heavy leather pouch. That's your signing bonus, your first taste of the Roman military machine. Congratulations, recruit. You are now officially a tiny, insignificant cog in Emperor Diocletian's masterstroke, the Tetrarchy. Sounds fancy, right? It basically means rule by four guys. Yet, Diocletian, the big boss Augustus in the east, that's why you're in Antioch, his main hangout, decided running the vast, fractious empire was too much for one dude. His solution split it in half, east and west. Then, each half gets an Emperor Augustus and a junior Emperor Caesar as backup and apprentice. So, 4 emperors. Because clearly, one palace intrigue wasn't enough fun, now you get quadruple the potential for betrayal, civil war, and general administrative chaos. Welcome aboard. You fumble with the pouch strings, anticipation warring with a knot of anxiety in your gut. This is it, your first real Roman coin. You tip the contents into your palm. Instead of the gleaming silver denarius you maybe imagined your heroic ancestor earned, you stare at, well, it looks like silver. Sort of. If you squint and hold it in the shade. It's a nummus, Diocletian's attempt to fix the money after decades of emperors quietly shaving silver off the old coins to make more of them, like watering down wine, but way less fun. This new coin should be better. Emphasis on should. It feels light, the image of the emperor on one side is a bit blurry, and the silver content, let's just say it's optimistic. Mainstream history nudge. Diocletian's coinage reform was a genuine attempt to stabilize an economy ravaged by hyperinflation. He standardized weights and tried to reintroduce higher value silver coins. It was a good idea in theory, but keeping the silver content high proved impossible long term, like trying to fill a leaky bucket with an eyedropper. A gruff centurion barks orders nearby, snapping you back to reality. You're herded with a bunch of other wide-eyed, sweaty recruits towards the sprawling military complex. The place buzzes with activity, legionaries in well-worn leather and mail, clerks clutching wax tablets looking permanently stressed, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the smell of dust, sweat, leather, and something vaguely like institutional stew. You try to follow the centurion's rapid-fire instructions about where to report, who your Optio deputy commander is, and which God's forsaken corner of the barracks you'll be bunking in. It involves a lot of acronyms and titles you've never heard before. The Tetrarchy didn't just split the emperors, it massively expanded the bureaucracy. Provinces were chopped into smaller pieces, military commands were divided and subdivided. More governors, more tax collectors, more paper pushers. The idea was tighter control, quicker response to threats internal and external. But standing here, feeling utterly lost, it just feels like layers upon layers of red tape. Quirky fact alert: to manage this insane new bureaucracy, Diocletian essentially invented the Roman equivalent of middle management. Seriously. The number of imperial officials ballooned. Imagine the HR department, but for running an empire on the brink. Fun times. You finally locate your designated barrack block, a long, low building smelling faintly of damp and generations of unwashed socks. You claim a cot, a wooden frame with a thin straw mattress that promises backaches, and start stowing your meager kit: a spare tunic, your precious pouch of dubious coins, a cheap knife, and a small bronze amulet of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, a popular soldier's god your mum pressed into your hand. As you arrange your pitiful belongings, you overhear two grizzled veterans leaning against a pillar, sharing a wineskin. "So, where you from, lad?" one grunts in your direction, not unkindly. "Lugdunum, sir," you reply, naming the major city in Gaul. The veteran nods. "Gaul, west." You report to Constantius Chlorus, then. "The Caesar over there. Or is it Maximian the Augustus this week?" He takes a long swig, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Gods, it's confusing. Used to be you swore allegiance to the emperor. One guy. In Rome. Simple. Now he gestures vaguely east and west. Who's your real boss? The Augustus here, his Caesar. The Augustus in Mediolanum, his Caesar. And what happens when old Diocletian finally kicks off? These Caesars are supposed to step up, but he trails off, sharing a knowing look with his companion. The unspoken fear hangs thick: civil war. It's the Roman pastime. Scholarly side-eye: historians still argue fiercely about the Tetrarchy. Was it a brilliant, pragmatic solution to an ungovernable empire, or did it institutionalize division and plant the seeds for the eventual permanent split between East and West? Ask 3 historians, get 5 answers. And that tension, that underlying worry about who really holds power, is already in the air you breathe in Antioch. Later, during a lukewarm, gritty meal of pools, think barley porridge, the military staple in the mess hall, you feel the subtle but palpable divide. The recruits and soldiers from the eastern provinces, Syria, Egypt, Anatolia, tend to cluster together. They speak Greek more readily than Latin, the language of command in the West. You, coming from Gaul, naturally gravitate towards others from Italia, Hispania, Africa Proconsularis. The jokes are different, the complaints about the food have regional variations, even the way you salute feels slightly off from the guys who trained in Nicomedia. Diocletian's reforms aimed for unity through division, but standing here, it feels more like separation. The East and West aren't just administrative zones, they're starting to feel like different worlds sharing an increasingly rickety roof. The glue holding it all together: fear of the boss. Diocletian was not known for his leniency, the paycheck such as it is, and maybe, just maybe, the fading, abstract idea of Roma Eterna, eternal Rome. But that idea feels a little less eternal, a little more strained, under the weight of 4 emperors and a mountain of paperwork. You finish your pools, the coarse grains sticking in your throat. Tomorrow brings your first real training. How to hold the big, curved scutum shield without falling over. How to thrust the heavy spada sword without poking your own eye out. How to march in formation until your feet bleed. The centurion promised you'd learn the discipline that made Rome great. As you head back to your cot, the sounds of the eastern night, unfamiliar insects, distant music in a scale that sounds strange to your western ear drift in. You clutch your amulet of Sol Invictus. The unconquered Sunday. You hope it's a good omen. Because right now, the empire you just signed up to defend feels conquerable. From the outside, sure, but maybe, just maybe, from within. The relentless Antioch sun beats down, but it's a different kind of heat radiating from the crowded marketplace you've managed to sneak off to on your first precious afternoon of leave. Forget the idealized mosaics of bountiful Roman markets. This is sensory overload with a side of existential dread. The air throbs with shouted prices, the sharp tang of fish competing with the pungent reek of leather and unwashed humanity, and an underlying current of desperation that makes your skin prickle. You clutch that leather pouch from yesterday, the one holding your first month's pay as a shiny new Miles soldier. It felt substantial back in the quiet barracks. Now, facing the reality of the forum, it feels terrifyingly light. Your mission simple. Send something, anything, back home to Lugdunum. Proof you're alive, maybe a little coin to help mum. Maybe some exotic eastern spice to impress your siblings. You spot a stall piled high with small sacks of pungent black peppercorns, the ultimate luxury import, worth its weight in silver back in gall. Your heart lifts. Perfect. You sidle up, trying to look like a seasoned spender, not a recruit drowning in bureaucracy just yesterday. How much for a Libra, you ask, trying to sound casual, pointing to a sack roughly a Roman pound in weight, about 329 grams, for the metrically minded among you. The merchant, a wiry man with eyes that miss nothing, sizes you up instantly. His gaze flicks to your military-issue sandals, the fresh calluses on your hands. New meat. He names a figure. Your blood runs cold. It's astronomical. More than half the coins in your pouch. You stare, dumbfounded. But, last week my mate said. The merchant barks a harsh laugh, devoid of humor. Last week, ha. Prices change faster than the emperor changes his mind, boy. He gestures impatiently at a small wax tablet propped against his wares. Scrawled on it are numbers, but they're blurred, overwritten. You see AC 100 hastily crossed out, ACC 200 scribbled over it, and even that looks freshly altered. Look around. He snaps. Grain doubled since the Nile floods were late again. Olive oil tripled. Don't even ask about decent wine. And you soldiers, he spits neatly onto the dusty ground near your feet. Your pay still based on Diocletian's pretty little nummus that's got less silver in it than my grandmother's soup spoon. Mainstream history nudge. This isn't just haggling, you're experiencing the death throes of the Roman economy. Decades of debasing the coinage, reducing precious metal content to mint more coins to pay armies and bureaucrats had finally triggered hyperinflation. Diocletian's reforms, like the nummus, tried to stop the bleeding, but the underlying pressures, constant warfare, a bloated state, shrinking tax base, disrupted trade were just too immense. His famous edict on maximum prices 301 AD, setting price caps on thousands of goods and services, it was a desperate Hail Mary that largely failed. Enforcement was near impossible, and it just drove goods onto the black market. Think of it as ancient price controls gone spectacularly wrong. Stung and embarrassed, you shuffle away from the pepper stall, the merchant's scornful laugh echoing in your ears. You need a plan B, something cheaper, but still meaningful. You spot a cloth merchant. Maybe a length of decent Eastern linen for mum. You approach, more cautiously this time. The merchant, a weary-looking woman, sees your pouch and just shakes her head slowly before you even speak. Not today, soldier, she sighs. Not with that. She points to a small basket beside her. It's not for sales, it's piled high with coins. Nummy. Lots of them. See this is what people try to pay with. I need real silver. Argente if you have any old ones left. Or gold solidi? Or, barter? Got any good leather decent tools grain? She looks at your empty hands and the pouch containing only the new, suspect coins. Her expression is pitying. Quirky fact alert: when coins become practically worthless, people get creative. Archaeologists find evidence of Romans using anything as makeshift currency during this hyperinflationary nightmare. Nails, seriously, bundles of iron nails. Scraps of bronze, even stamped pieces of leather pretending to be coins. Imagine trying to buy your weekly bread with a handful of roofing nails. Not ideal. Defeated on the gift front, you decide to at least buy yourself a decent meal. The barracks pools is already a grim memory. You find a stall selling hot, greasy sausages, Isatia aumentata, little spiced meat patties wrapped in caul fat. The smell is intoxicating. You ask the price. It's high, but manageable, for now. You hand over a few nummy. The vendor takes them, weighs them quickly on a tiny scale with worn weights, scowls slightly at their lightness, but accepts. As you bite into the hot, salty, fatty goodness, a brief moment of bliss, you witness a scene nearby. A woman, clutching a much larger pouch than yours, bulging with coins, is trying to buy a small sack of wheat. The grain merchant demands a sum that makes her gasp. She empties her entire pouch onto his counter, a cascade of bronze nummy. He scoops them into a large bucket almost contemptuously, barely counting, then gestures dismissively at the sack. The woman looks near tears, scooping her meager purchase into her arms. Your own sausage suddenly tastes like ashes. Scholarly side-eye: just how bad was the inflation? The numbers are staggering, but hard to pin down exactly. We know that in the century before Diocletian, the silver content of the denarius plummeted from nearly pure silver to less than 5%. Prices skyrocketed accordingly, perhaps by thousands of percent over decades. Diocletian's reforms briefly stabilized things, but the rot was too deep. Historians still debate the primary cause. Was it purely the debasement, or were deeper structural issues like declining agricultural productivity, plague, and the sheer cost of defense the real culprits, with the dodgy coins just the symptom? Chicken or egg, Roman edition. You finish your sausage, the grease coating your fingers, a stark contrast to the hollow feeling in your stomach that has nothing to do with hunger. You wander past stalls selling tools, pottery, cheap jewelry. The desperation is palpable. People aren't browsing, they're hunting for necessities, clutching their coin pouches like lifelines, faces etched with worry. You see a money changer's stall, surrounded by a jostling crowd. Men shout offers, waving bags of coins. The money changer, protected by a couple of burly guards, barks back rates. 400 nummy for one Argentus of the old standard. 700 for a Constantinian solidus. Gold coins, minted by Constantine later, would become the only stable currency, but they're rare as hen's teeth right now. It's a frantic, depressing dance. Your own pouch feels like lead. The silver nummy you received, they might as well be pebbles from the Orontes riverbed. You abandon the idea of sending anything home. You can barely afford to exist here yourself. Instead, you spend a few of your increasingly dubious coins on a small block of hard cheese and some dried figs, survival rations for the coming week, a hedge against the inevitable moment when your pay buys even less. As you trudge back towards the military quarter, the imposing walls of Diocletian's palace complex loom in the distance, a symbol of imperial power and order. But down here, in the grubby reality of the market, that order feels like a thin veneer cracking under the pressure. The coins in your pouch aren't just money, they're a physical manifestation of the empire's fraying stability. The legions might still hold the frontiers for now, The emperors might still issue decrees from their thrones, but the foundation, the everyday trust that a piece of metal represents real value, that a day's work buys a day's bread, is crumbling faster than a cheap brick in the rain. You tighten your grip on the cheese and figs. It's going to be a long, hungry slog. And the border you're eventually headed to, the one supposedly holding back the tide, it suddenly feels a lot less solid, guarded by men paid in coins that might soon be only good for throwing at birds, if you could afford to waste them. The rhythmic crunch 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 of hobnailed sandals on packed earth is the soundtrack of your life now. Weeks of bone-jarring marches, drills that turned your muscles to jelly and then, somehow, to something resembling hardened leather, and lectures on formations you're pretty sure were invented by sadists have finally led you here. Not to glorious battle, not yet. But to the limes Germanicus, the great frontier ditch, palisade, and watchtower system that's supposed to be the unbreachable bulwark between civilized Rome and the trackless, terrifying forests of Germania. You finally reach your assigned post, a fortlet clinging to the Rhine's west bank like a barnacle on a weary old ship. As the gates groan open to admit your weary cohort, your first impression isn't awe. It's damp. And a profound sense of leakiness. The fort, Castellum minus literally, smaller fort, they weren't big on creative names out here, smells of wet wood, mildew, and the faint, ever-present tang of the river. The timber walls, once sharp and imposing, look weathered, patched in places with crudely hewn logs that don't quite match. Some of the watchtowers along the riverbank, visible through the open gate before it clangs shut behind you, lean at slightly drunken angles. The centurion in charge, a man named Severus whose face looks like it was carved from old oak and left out in one too many storms, greets your unit with a grunt that could mean anything. "Welcome to the edge of the world, boys," he rasps, his voice like gravel under a cartwheel. "Keep your spears sharp, your eyes sharper, and for Jupiter's sake, try not to fall into the river. Current will have you in barbarian territory before you can scream Ave Caesar." He assigns bunks drafty, shared spaces in long barracks buildings where the chill seeps up from the stone floor, and duties. Yours night watch. On the northern section of the palisade. Joy. Later, under a cloak already beating with cold mist, you stand shivering on the walkway behind the main timber wall. Your scutum feels like a slab of ice against your leg. The Rhine is a vast, dark murmur to your right, invisible in the moonless night but felt, a cold, wet breath on your face. Ahead, beyond the ditch and the sharpened stakes, some of which look suspiciously rotten at the base, lies the Silvabitionis, the beech forest. It's an impenetrable black mass, rustling with unseen things. This is it. The legendary frontier. The barrier holding back the howling hordes. Mainstream history nudge, the limes wasn't just a wall, it was a complex system. Ditches, earthen banks, wooden palisades, later sometimes stone, forts, fortlets, castella, watchtowers, burghi, and military roads. It was a statement of control, a customs barrier, and an early warning system. But by the late 3rd and 4th centuries, maintaining this vast network, stretching from the Rhine to the Danube, was becoming an unsustainable drain on resources. Manpower was spread thin, repairs lagged, and the unbreachable myth was starting to show cracks wider than the ones in these timbers. Your watch partner is Felix, a lanky legionary who's been here for 2 years. He's wrapped in every scrap of wool he owns and still shivers. He sees you peering nervously into the abyss of the forest and lets out a low chuckle. "Relax, new fish. They won't come over tonight," he says, his breath fogging in the air. "Over?" you ask, confused. Felix gestures vaguely downriver, towards a bend obscured by darkness. "Easier to go around. Or," he lowers his voice conspiratorially, "just through. Through but the patrols the river fleet. Felix snorts. Patrols, we're lucky if the river patrol barge makes it past here once a week. Needs repairs. Again. As for foot patrols beyond the ditch, he shrugs, a movement lost under his layers. Used to be daily. Now maybe twice a week if the optios feeling ambitious. Too few boots, too much ground. He nudges a section of the palisade with his foot. A small chunk of damp, spongy wood crumbles away. See that's dinner for beetles. Whole sections are like this. They don't send enough seasoned timber, just green stuff that rots faster. Quirky fact alert, Roman military engineers were clever. Some sections of the limes, especially near rivers, used water-filled ditches as an extra obstacle. Imagine trying to charge through a freezing moat before even reaching the main wall. But maintaining these watery defenses required constant dredging and careful water management tasks that often fell by the wayside as resources dwindled. Think of it as the world's most depressing swimming pool maintenance job. As your watch drags on, the cold gnawing deep into your bones, Felix points out other signs of decay. A watchtower further down the line is completely dark. Occupied, you whisper. Occupied by owls and rats, Felix replies. Garrisoned not for 6 months. Men pulled south to deal with something. Always something. He points towards the forest edge, maybe a quarter mile away. You squint. Is that a faint, flickering orange glow? Not one, but two. Settlement, Felix says flatly. Frankish, probably. Been there a year. Nice little farmstead. Right on our side of the old boundary markers. But, that's Roman territory. You hiss, shocked. Felix gives you a look that's equal parts pity and weariness. Was. Now it's just territory. We don't have the men to evict them. They're not raiding us, they're farming. Paying, well, something to the tax collector when he bothers to come this far out. It's easier to pretend they're not there. Officially, they're federati now. Allied tribes. Supposed to help guard the frontier. He spits over the wall, a gesture of pure contempt. Guarded from who? Their cousins across the river. Don't make me laugh. Scholarly side-eye, the concept of federati, federated allies, is crucial and controversial. Were these Germanic settlers inside the empire loyal allies providing essential military muscle, or were they Trojan horses, slowly eroding Roman control from within? Historians debate how intentional Roman policy was. Was it a strategic masterstroke to use barbarians to fight barbarians, or was it a desperate, ad hoc response to manpower shortages and crumbling defenses, essentially outsourcing the empire's security to the very groups it feared? The truth is messy, probably a bit of both, and standing on this rotting wall, it feels terrifyingly like the latter. Dawn breaks, gray and damp, revealing the depressing reality Felix hinted at. The river is wide and sluggish. You see no patrol boats. The forest looms, dark and close. And there, clearly visible now in the misty morning light, are the plumes of smoke from not two, but several settlements nestled comfortably within what your old maps back in Lugdunum would have shown as firmly Roman soil. You see figures moving, not warriors in fearsome gear, but farmers tending fields, herding cattle. They look settled, permanent. Later that day, on a work detail patching a section of the ditch that's collapsed, you talk to an old-timer mending a net by the river bank. He's a civilian, a fisherman supplying the fort. Things change, lad, he says, not looking up from his knots. When my granddad fished here, you wouldn't see a barbarian this side of the river unless he was in chains or dead. Now he gestures with his chin towards the nearest settlement's smoke. They bring good furs sometimes. Trade for salt, a bit of iron. Keep to themselves mostly. Better than the raiding parties we used to get, he offers a pragmatic, weary smile. You look back at the crumbling palisade, the undermanned towers, the quiet acceptance of settlements deep within the Empire's supposed boundary. The mighty limes doesn't feel like a shield anymore. It feels like a worn-out sieve, straining to hold back not a sudden flood, but a slow, relentless seepage. The enemy isn't just out there beyond the dark trees. They're already inside, building homes, lighting fires, becoming part of the landscape you were sent to defend. The frontier isn't a line on a map. It's a fading idea, dissolving like mist over the cold, grey waters of the Rhine. And you're standing guard over a ghost. The rhythmic tedium of frontier life, damp watches, crumbling palisades, the unsettling sight of Frankish farmsteads thriving inside the nominal border is shattered one grey morning not by barbarian horns, but by the sharp, urgent blare of Roman buccini signaling assembly. Not the usual drill call. This one has a frantic, jagged edge. You scramble from your cot, heart pounding, fumbling for your spathe and scutum, expecting to see smoke on the horizon or hear the war cries of a warbold crossing the Rhine. Instead, the chaos is entirely internal. The main parade ground of Castellum is a churning sea of confused, half-armored soldiers. Centurions bark contradictory orders. Optios look lost. At the center, standing on an overturned supply crate, is Flavius, the commander of your cohort. His face is pale, but his voice booms with forced authority. Men! Calm yourselves. Stand fast. This is a misunderstanding. Orders from Mediolanum are awaited. We serve the Augustus Constantius. We. His words are drowned out by a roar from a large group of soldiers clustered around a massive, bear-like legionary named Ursus. Ursus, usually jovial and slow-moving, is incandescent with rage. He holds a scrap of parchment aloft like a battle standard. Lies. Ursus bellows, his voice cracking. Constantius Chlorus is dead. Dead in Britannia. And who does the purple pass to not his Caesar, Severus? Oh no. That snake Galerius, the Eastern Augustus, he names himself senior. He names his own lapdog, that rat Flavius Valerius Severus, as Western Augustus. Severus. A man who's never set foot on the Rhine. A man who licks Galerius's boots. The accusation hangs in the cold air. Constantius Chlorus, the Western Caesar you nominally served, the father of the young Constantine currently somewhere in the east as a hostage guest of Galerius, dead and the succession bypassing his natural heir and lieutenant, jumping straight to an Eastern puppet mainstream history nudge. Welcome to the Tetrarchy's first major crack-up. Diocletian and his CO Augustus Maximian had just retired in 305 AD, supposedly passing power smoothly to their Caesars, Constantius West and Galerius East. Constantius died barely a year later campaigning in Britannia. Galerius, as senior Augustus, asserted his authority to appoint the new Western Augustus, choosing his ally Flavius Valerius Severus, ignoring Constantius's popular troops and his son Constantine. This top-down imposition shattered the Tetrarchy's carefully balanced, if fragile, order and instantly ignited military discontent. It was the first major, bloody crack in the system Diocletian built to prevent civil war. Irony, thy name is Roman politics. Ursus isn't finished. And what about our HMM Severus sits safe in Mediolanum? Does he care about rotten palisades? Does he care that our nummy buy less mud than dirt? No. He cares about pleasing Galerius, while we freeze and starve on this leaking frontier. He slams a fist against his worn leather cuirass. We swore to serve Rome. Not some Easterner's puppet. A murmur of agreement, low and dangerous, ripples through the crowd. The centurion Severus, not the new emperor, just unlucky with names, tries to push forward, his face thunderous. Ursus! Stand down! This is mutiny. The chain of command. Chain of command, Ursus spits, turning on him. What chain? The chain that breaks every time an emperor sneezes, the chain that forgets the men who actually hold the line. He gestures wildly around the fort. Look at it. Falling apart. We send requests for timber, for reinforcements, for pay that's worth something. What comes? Nothing. Or orders telling us to make do. He points a thick finger at Flavius, still pale on his crate. And him. Our prefect. What has he done? Kissed the right rings, sent the right reports, saying all is well while we rot. The mood shifts palpably. The initial confusion crystallizes into anger, fueled by months of neglect, decaying defenses, worthless pay, and the sudden, distant power play that feels like a personal betrayal. Flavius, sensing the tide turning, tries again, his voice pleading now. Men. Think. Rebellion against the Augustus Galerius has legions. Galerius is in the east. Shouts another soldier, his voice shrill with adrenaline. Let him stay there. The West needs a Western emperor. One who knows the Rhine. One who knows us. A name starts as a whisper, then grows into a chant, tentative at first, then gaining terrifying momentum. Constantine. 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 Quirky fact alert: the acclamation of a new emperor wasn't always a formal Senate vote. Often, especially in the chaotic late empire, it was a barracks room coup. Soldiers, particularly the elite comitatus's mobile field armies, would literally raise a candidate on their shields, the ultimate job interview. If the guy didn't get stabbed immediately and other armies agreed, congratulations, you're Augustus. Constantine himself would later be acclaimed this way in York after his father's death, a much more successful version of what Ursus is attempting here. Talk about a high-stakes promotion. You stand frozen, your knuckles white on your spear shaft. Constantine Constantius, Cloris's son, the young officer held by Galerius, he's not here. This is madness. Ursus sees the hesitation in the crowd, the fear battling the anger. He needs action. Now. He scans the officers. His eyes land on Marcus, the fort's primus pilus senior centurion, a quiet, competent veteran respected by the men. Ursus strides towards him, grabbing Marcus's arm, hauling him towards the overturned crate where Flavius still stands, looking like he might faint. Marcus! Ursus roars, pushing the stunned centurion onto the crate beside Flavius. A soldier's soldier. He knows the limes. He knows our worth. Why not him? Why not Marcus as our Augustus? The chant falters. Constantine was a name, a distant echo of a beloved commander. Marcus is here. Known. Respected. The crowd hesitates, murmurs. Marcus looks horrified, trying to pull away, but Ursus holds his arm in a vice-like grip. Flavius sees his chance slipping away entirely. He draws himself up, mustering his last shreds of dignity. Men! This is folly. Marcus is a fine centurion, but Augustus, you think Galerius will accept this? Severus, they will crush us. Send legions. We are but one cohort on a rotting frontier. Think of your families. Think. He doesn't get to finish. A rotten cabbage, hurled from the back of the crowd, smacks him square in the chest. It's followed by a clod of mud, then another. The dam breaks. A surge of angry soldiers rushes the crate. Flavius is pulled down, disappearing under a wave of bodies. Marcus, struggling against Ursus's grip, is also engulfed. You hear shouts, the sickening crunch of wood on bone, the sharp ring of metal on metal, not battle, but riot. Scholarly side-eye, the role of the late Roman military in emperor-making is a huge debate. Were soldiers just mindless thugs easily swayed by demagogues like Ursus, or were they politically aware, deeply frustrated by a distant, ineffective central government that failed to provide basic support or respect? Did they genuinely believe in alternatives like Marcus or later Constantine, or was it just opportunistic anger? Historians argue over how much agency and political understanding the rank and file possessed. Watching Flavius disappear under a hail of vegetables and fists, it feels terrifyingly raw and personal, less about grand strategy, more about rotten cabbage and even rottener leadership. You're swept along in the tide, pushed and shoved. You see Severus the centurion trying to form a shield wall with a handful of loyalists, but they're overwhelmed, knocked aside. It's over in minutes. Flavius lies groaning on the muddy ground, bruised but alive, stripped of his commander's cloak and insignia. Marcus, looking dazed and clutching a bleeding scalp, stands unsteadily, held up by Ursus. Someone has draped a rough, dark red sagum military cloak around Marcus's shoulders. It's the closest thing to purple they have. Ursus raises Marcus's limp hand. "Hail Marcus Augustus!" he bellows. The cheer that follows is ragged, unsure, fueled more by adrenaline and the thrill of rebellion than conviction. A few soldiers start tearing down the faded images of Constantius Chlorus and the official portraits of the newly proclaimed Severus Augustus that adorned the Principia headquarters. You stand there, breathing hard, mud splattered on your tunic. One moment you were contemplating the leaky frontier, the next, you're a participant in high treason. A new emperor has been declared. Not by the Senate, not by the Tetrarchy's rules, but by a mob in a crumbling fort, orchestrated by a bear of a man named Ursus. The purple, such as it is, has landed on the bewildered shoulders of Primus Pilus Marcus. The distant power struggles of emperors have crashed onto the muddy parade ground of Castellum Minus. And you have a sinking feeling Ursus hasn't thought about what happens tomorrow, when Galerius and his puppet Severus hear the news. The limes might be leaking, but right now, the biggest threat feels like it's coming from within the empire itself. The rot isn't just in the palisade timbers anymore. It's in the very chain of command. And you're holding a piece of it, sticky with mud and something that looks suspiciously like Flavius's nose blood. The chaotic, mud-splattered fever dream of Marcus's brief, bewildering reign at Castellum Minus lasted precisely 3 days. 3 days of Ursus bellowing orders, Marcus looking like he'd swallowed a live eel, and the rest of you jumping at every distant sound, expecting Galerius's legions to come crashing through the rotten palisade. They didn't come from the east. They came from the south. Not Galerius's men, but soldiers loyal to the official new Western Augustus, Flavius Valerius Severus. They arrived not with siege engines, but with crisp orders, promises of pardons for the rank and file if they surrendered immediately, and the cold, professional detachment of men who outnumbered you 5-1. Ursus roared defiance for about 10 seconds before a well-aimed sling stone dropped him like a felled ox. Marcus, looking almost relieved, tore off the makeshift red cloak before anyone could arrest him. The rebellion fizzled out like a damp fuse. You were disarmed, yelled it, and reassigned faster than you could blink. Punishment for most of you, it was being bundled onto wagons and marched south, far south. Not towards Mediolanum and Severus, but towards the furnace heat of Thrace. Towards a gathering storm named Fritigern. Towards Adrianople. Now, weeks later, you stand not on a rotting wooden palisade overlooking a river, but on a dusty, sun-baked hill overlooking a vast, sprawling, stinking mess. It's not a battlefield yet. It's a refugee camp crossed with an armed camp, a chaotic sea of humanity, Roman and Gothic, simmering under a brutal August sun. The air vibrates with tension, thick with the smells of unwashed bodies, horse dung, cooking fires, and fear. Below, you see the ordered lines of the Roman camp tents in neat rows, ditch and rampart freshly dug. Emperor Valens himself is here. The real Augustus, not some mud-splattered centurion shoved onto a crate. He's brought the cream of the Eastern Field Army, the comitatenses, gleaming or at least, dusty in their scale and mail. Confidence, bordering on arrogance, radiates from the imperial pavilion. After all, they're facing refugees, warriors no one seems quite sure. Mainstream history nudge, you're witnessing the culmination of a massive Gothic migration crisis. Pushed westward by the terrifying advance of the Huns from the steppes, entire Gothic tribes, mainly the Turvingi under Fritigern and the Gruthungi under Alatheus and Saphrax, sought refuge inside the Roman Empire in 376 AD. Valens, the Eastern Emperor, initially agreed, seeing potential new soldiers and taxpayers. But corrupt Roman officials exploited them mercilessly, starving them, selling them dog meat for bread, and kidnapping their children as slaves. Predictably, the Goths revolted. Now, in 378 AD, Valens has marched to crush them near Adrianople, modern Edirne, Turkey. He's confident. He has the professional army. The Goths are disorganized, desperate, and trapped. What could go wrong? You're not with the gleaming legions. Your punishment detail landed you in an auxiliary unit attached to the Scutarii cavalry, tasked with guarding the sprawling baggage train parked on a nearby hill. Your view is panoramic, but your role is glorified babysitter for wagons full of hardtack, spare spears, and the Emperor's spare socks. It gives you time to observe the Gothic camp. It's less a camp, more a vast, mobile city encircled by thousands of wagons, not sleek Roman carus, but heavy, lumbering, ox-drawn behemoths. They're arranged in a massive, loose circle, a defensive laager called a wagonburg. Women, children, and the elderly huddle inside this makeshift fortress. Outside, Gothic warriors mill about. They look different from the Franks back on the Rhine. Taller, fiercer, many with long hair knotted in distinctive top knots or flowing loose. They wear less armor, mostly leather, some mail shirts looted or traded, but they carry long swords, axes, and those distinctive oval shields. And horses. So many horses. Light cavalry swirl around the edges like angry hornets. Quirky fact alert, those massive Gothic wagons weren't just for hauling grandma in the cooking pots. They were mobile fortresses. When circled wagonburg, their high sides and interlocked wheels formed a formidable barrier against cavalry. Archers and spear throwers could fight from the relative safety of the wagon beds. Think of it as the original RV park from hell, designed for maximum defensive annoyance. Romans found them incredibly frustrating to assault. A grizzled veteran in your unit, scarred from a dozen forgotten skirmishes, spits into the dust. "See those horsemen," he mutters, nodding towards the swirling Gothic cavalry. Alans. Or Huns. Mercenaries. Fritigern's bought muscle. Fast. Nasty. Don't fight like proper cavalry. More like insects. Sting and run. Sting and run. He squints at the distant Roman lines forming up late in the afternoon. Valens, impatient, perhaps overconfident, perhaps misled by faulty scouts reporting only part of the Gothic force was present, has decided to attack. Now. without waiting for reinforcements from the Western Emperor Gratian. Stupid, the veteran grumbles. Bloody stupid. Son sa hammer. Men are cooked. And attacking uphill towards those bloody wagons, he shakes his head. Pride. Always bloody pride. You watch, a knot of dread tightening in your stomach, as the Roman infantry advances in their disciplined lines, shields locked, a slow, relentless metal tide flowing up the slope towards the Gothic wagon circle. The Gothic foot warriors surge forward to meet them, a roaring wave of fury meeting the Roman wall with a crash that echoes even to your distant hill. It's brutal, grinding work. The Romans push, the Goths hold, screaming defiance. The noise is immense, metal on metal, war cries, screams. Dust chokes the air. Scholarly side-eye, why did Valens attack? The debate rages. Was he truly misinformed about Gothic strength? Was he jealous of his nephew Gratian's military successes in the West and eager for his own glory, or was he pressured by courtiers hungry for plunder? Some historians point to the intelligence failure. Roman scouts underestimated the Gothic numbers and, crucially, the location and readiness of the Gothic cavalry reserve. Others see it as sheer imperial hubris, a fatal underestimation of desperate, cornered people fighting for their family's survival. Watching the legions struggle uphill in the brutal heat, you'd bet on hubris mixed with terrible intel. Then, it happens. Just as the battle seems locked in a deadly stalemate, a vast dust cloud appears on the horizon to the northeast. It moves fast. Too fast for infantry. The Gothic cavalry reserve, the Gruthungi under Alatheus and Saphrax, plus their Alan and Hun mercenaries, arrives. They weren't off foraging as Valens' scouts claimed. They were waiting. They hit the Roman flank and rear like a thunderbolt. From your vantage point, it's horrifyingly clear. The disciplined Roman lines, already strained from the frontal assault, simply disintegrate. The cavalry doesn't just charge, they flow around the flanks, isolating chunks of the infantry. The Gothic foot warriors, sensing the shift, redouble their efforts, hacking and pushing. The Roman cavalry, caught out of position or perhaps just overwhelmed, offers little resistance. You see units trying to form shield walls, but it's too late, too chaotic. They're surrounded, cut off. Panic spreads like wildfire through the Roman ranks. The orderly advance collapses into a desperate, screaming scramble. Men throw down their heavy shields to run faster, only to be cut down from behind. The veteran beside you swears violently, his face ashen. Flank S turned. Rear S gone. It's a bloody massacre now. His voice is thick with despair, not fear. He's seen this before, just never on this scale. Down in the maelstrom, you glimpse the imperial bodyguard trying to form a last stand around Valens' position. But the tide is unstoppable. The Emperor's standard disappears under a swirling mass of Gothic warriors. Rumors later say Valens fell, his body never recovered. Truth or myth, the symbol is clear, the Emperor is gone. The heart of the Roman army stops beating. The rout is total. Survivors stream back towards Adrianople, pursued relentlessly by Gothic cavalry. Your hill, overlooking the baggage train, suddenly becomes a target. Groups of Gothic warriors, flushed with victory and seeing easy plunder, break off from the main pursuit and charge uphill towards the wagons. Your commander barks orders, but the auxiliaries around you look terrified. The veteran grabs your arm, his eyes desperate. Run, lad! Scatter! Into the woods! Now! They want the baggage, not us. Run! You don't need telling twice. You drop your spear, rip off your heavy helmet, and sprint away from the wagons, away from the road, towards a scraggly patch of woodland you spotted earlier. Behind you, you hear the triumphant shouts of the Goths as they overrun the poorly defended train, the splintering of wood as wagons are looted. The sounds of battle fade slightly, replaced by the closer, more personal terror of being hunted. You crash through bushes, thorns tearing at your tunic, lungs burning. The image seared into your mind isn't of the emperor falling, but of the unstoppable Gothic cavalry sweeping around the Roman flank like dark water around a rock. The invincible Roman legion, the terror of the ancient world, hadn't just been beaten. It had been annihilated. The myth was dead on the dusty plains of Adrianople. And you, a nobody from Lugdunum who survived a stupid mutiny, are now running for your life because the Empire's mailed fist just got shattered like cheap pottery. The world just changed. And it changed in the time it took for a cloud of dust to appear on the horizon. The desperate, thorn-scratched flight from the Adrianople baggage train feels like a fever dream. Weeks of skulking through forests, begging scraps from terrified villagers who looked at you, a ragged soldier without a unit, with equal parts pity and suspicion, and jumping at every snapped twig finally lead you not to safety, but to the only place that makes sense anymore, Roma. The eternal city. The beating heart of the empire. Surely, here, the shockwaves of Adrianople will be absorbed. Surely, here, the walls are high, the granaries full, and the spirit unbroken. You arrive not with a triumphant legion, but as a dusty, hollow-eyed refugee disguised as a laborer, slipping through the Porta Flaminia amidst a throng of carts and anxious faces. The sheer scale of the Aurelian walls hits you first, towering cliffs of brick-faced concrete, bristling with towers, dwarfing the rotten palisade of the Rhine. A surge of irrational relief washes over you. Nothing, not even the victorious Goths, could breach this. Mainstream history nudge, the Aurelian walls, built between 271 to 275 AD in response to barbarian incursions that reached northern Italy, were a marvel of late Roman engineering. Roughly 12 miles long, 26 feet high, with 18 major gates and 381 towers, they were the largest defensive circuit built around Rome since the Republican era. They symbolically and physically reaffirmed Rome's might at a time of crisis. Standing before them in 408 AD, decades after Adrianople, they still looked invincible. Looks, as they say, can be deceiving. But the relief curdles almost instantly. The city buzzes, but it's not the confident hum of the capital of the world. It's a frantic, brittle energy, thick with fear. Rumors swirl through the crowded streets like sewer gas, the Goths are coming. Alaric is marching south. He's crossed the Alps. He's in Etruria. Names like Stilicho, the half-vandal magister militum who's been holding the West together with sheer force of will and political cunning for years, are whispered with desperate hope. Stilicho will stop him, people mutter. He always does. You find work hauling sacks of grain from barges on the Tiber up to the Aventine Hill granaries. The work is back-breaking, but it keeps you fed and inside the walls. From the wharves, you see the true state of things. The river traffic is frantic, but much of it seems to be leaving wealthy families loading furniture, art, even statues onto barges headed for coastal villas or, increasingly, towards Ravenna, the new, swamp-protected capital in the north. The grain ships arriving are fewer than you'd expect, their cargoes guarded by grim-faced soldiers. Quirky fact alert, Rome's survival depended utterly on grain imports, primarily from North Africa and Egypt. The massive Annona system, distributing free or subsidized grain later bred to the city's populace, was the ultimate social safety net and political stabilizer. Blockading the grain supply wasn't just a military tactic, it was psychological warfare against the very heart of Rome. Alaric knew this. His army might not be able to storm the walls yet, but he could strangle the city by controlling the countryside and ports. Imagine a siege conducted by cutting off the pizza delivery for a city of 1,000,000 hungry Romans. Not fun. Then, the hammer falls. News rips through the city like wildfire, turning the brittle anxiety into outright panic. Stilicho is dead. Executed. Not by Goths, but by the paranoid Emperor Honorius in Ravenna, convinced by courtiers that his most capable general was plotting against him. The man who defeated Alaric multiple times, who orchestrated complex alliances, who was the linchpin holding Italy together, gone. Murdered by the empire he bled to save. The collective gasp of horror and disbelief is almost audible. The last, frayed thread of confidence snaps. Within days, the nightmare becomes visible. From the top of the Aventine, hauling your last sack of the day, you see them. Not a vast, chaotic horde like Adrianople, but a disciplined, purposeful presence. Gothic outriders appear on the horizon, scouting the approaches. Then, the main force. Thousands of warriors, families, wagons, Alaric's entire people, on the move. They don't charge the walls screaming. They encamp. Methodically. Efficiently. They surround Rome. Not tightly at first, but the noose is there. The Porta Salaria, the Porta Nomentana, the Porta Tiburtina, all watched. The Tiber bridges upstream are controlled. The message is chillingly clear: we are here. You are contained. Life inside the walls twists into a grotesque parody. The Senate, a body more accustomed to ceremonial debates than existential crisis, convenes in near panic. The prefect tries to maintain order, but the fear is corrosive. Food prices, already high, skyrocket into the stratosphere. Your daily wage as a laborer might buy you half a loaf of coarse bread. The public bakeries, symbols of imperial benevolence, have lines stretching for blocks, filled with hollow-eyed citizens. The air fills with a new smell, the acrid tang of fierce sweat and desperation, overlaying the usual city stench. Scholarly side-eye, Alaric's first siege of Rome 408 AD is fascinating for what it didn't involve: a massive assault. Alaric was a master strategist playing a longer game. Historians debate his ultimate goal: did he want to sack the city, force a massive ransom, secure land and titles within the empire for his people, or was he trying to pressure Honorius into a formal treaty? His tactics: blockade, negotiation, psychological pressure suggest he understood that Rome's true vulnerability wasn't its walls, but its dependence on imports and the fragile psyche of its privileged, complacent populace. He wasn't just besieging a city, he was besieging an idea. You witness the surreal spectacle of ambassadors going back and forth, grim-faced senators, their togas looking incongruous against the backdrop of armed guards, are escorted out to parley with Alaric. They return looking paler, older. The demands are staggering. Gold. Lots of gold. Silver. Silk. Pepper. Thousands of pounds of pepper. And freedom for all Gothic slaves within the city. The numbers whispered in the forums are mind-boggling. 5,000 pounds of gold, 30,000 of silver, 3,000 pounds of pepper. It feels less like a ransom and more like the empire itself being weighed on a scale and found wanting to pay. The city turns on itself. Temples are stripped of their precious votive offerings, golden statues of gods and goddesses melted down. Wealthy patricians are persuaded to donate their family plate. Even the gilded bronze statues adorning the public spaces aren't spared. You see workmen, under armed guard, carefully or not so carefully dismantling a massive, gilded statue of Virtus in the Forum. The virtue of Rome, quite literally, being sold for survival. The ultimate irony, some of the gold and silver being handed over to Alaric was likely mined by Gothic slaves in the first place. Quirky footnote: the demand for pepper wasn't a random extravagance. This exotic spice, imported from India at immense cost, was a supreme status symbol and store of value in the ancient world, almost as good as gold. Handing over thousands of pounds was a massive transfer of wealth and a humiliating symbol of Rome's dependence on luxuries it could no longer protect. Alaric accepts the ransom. The blockade loosens. The Gothic army withdraws, but not far. They hover in Etruria, a dark cloud on the horizon. The city breathes a collective, shaky sigh of relief. Markets reopen, cautiously. Bread lines shorten slightly. There's even a brittle attempt at normalcy. But the illusion is shattered. You look at the gaps where statues once stood. You feel the lingering hunger in your belly. You remember the sight of Gothic horsemen calmly watching the lifeblood of the city drain away. The Aurelian walls still stand, unbreached, towering and mighty. But something fundamental has been breached. The invincibility is gone. The eternal city paid a king's ransom to barbarians camped outside its gates. The heart still beats, but the pulse is weak, thready, and filled with the cold dread that Alaric, or someone like him, might just come back. And next time, gold and pepper might not be enough. The myth of Rome's impregnability died not with a battering ram, but with the quiet clink of melted temple gold being counted out into Gothic hands. The sack hasn't happened yet. But the city already feels plundered. The lingering shame of Rome paying off Alaric, the hollow victory of watching the Gothic host withdraw only to loom just over the horizon like a bad debt collector, eventually fades into the grim necessity of survival. You can't haul grain sacks forever, not when the specter of hunger hangs over the city like a shroud and the whispers say Alaric is demanding more land, recognition, a place within the empire. The army, what's left of it, needs bodies. So, with the pragmatism born of desperation and the faint hope of regular pay however dubious the coin, you dust off what's left of your military kit salvaged from the disaster at Adrianople, miraculously kept through your flight, and re-enlist. But the army you join isn't the one you knew. You find yourself stationed not in a gleaming legionary fortress, but in a sprawling, makeshift camp outside Mediolanum Milan, the western imperial capital after Ravenna proved too damp even for Honorius's liking. The first thing that hits you isn't the drill sergeant's bark, but the smell. It's different. Less leather and sweat, more animal fat, wood smoke, and a pungent, fermented dairy tang you can't quite place. The second thing is the sound. Latin is still the language of command, but it's layered with guttural Germanic tongues, Gothic, Frankish, Alanic, and the rhythmic clang of smiths working on styles of armor unfamiliar to Roman forges. You've been assigned to a numerus, a unit whose composition would have made your old Rhine garrison centurion spit his wine. Maybe a third are Romans like you, veterans with haunted eyes, or green recruits pressed into service. The rest foederati, federates, allied warriors. Goths mostly, big men with braided hair and fierce mustaches, wearing a mix of Roman mail and their own patterned tunics and trousers, a garment Romans still find vaguely scandalous. There are a few Franks, quieter but watchful, and even a couple of wiry Huns who keep to themselves, sharpening their arrows with unsettling focus. Mainstream history nudge: this is the late Roman army's new reality. Decimated by civil wars and disasters like Adrianople, chronically short of manpower, the empire increasingly relied on recruiting entire tribes or bands of warriors foederati under their own leaders. They were given land settlements, hospitalitas, supplies, and pay in exchange for military service. It was outsourcing empire defense to the very groups who sometimes threatened it. Think of it as hiring the neighborhood bullies to guard your house after they've already kicked your fence in. Risky? Absolutely. Necessary? The Empire thought so. Your new tent mate is Burek, a goth from Fritigern's old following. He's massive, with forearms like tree roots and eyes that miss nothing. He speaks broken, heavily accented Latin. You speak no Gothic. Communication involves a lot of pointing, grunting, and surprisingly effective facial expressions. He examines your Roman spada with a critical eye, snorts, and shows you his own weapon, a long, single-edged blade called a spada too, but heavier, with a simpler hilt. Good for chop, he grunts, miming a downward blow. Your poking stick. He gestures dismissively at your gladius-style thrusting sword. You feel vaguely insulted. Training is eclectic. The Roman drill masters try to impose the old shield wall formations, the synchronized advance. The Goths, used to more fluid, individual combat focused on powerful blows and shield bashing, struggle with the rigid discipline. During one frustrating drill where the foederati keep bunching up instead of maintaining the line, a Frankish warrior named Clodio throws down his shield in disgust. Why stand like stone? He barks in thick Latin. Enemy not stand still. We move. We hit hard. This is for dead men walking. The Roman drill instructor, a stickler for tradition, turns purple. A near brawl erupts before a senior officer intervenes. Quirky fact alert: cultural clashes weren't just about fighting styles. Romans were obsessed with bathing. Big public baths were social hubs. Many Germanic tribes, however, associated immersion in stagnant water with disease and danger. Getting a group of Goths or Franks into a Roman-style bathhouse could be a major ordeal, involving negotiation, threats, and sometimes outright refusal. Imagine the hygiene challenges in a mixed-unit barracks. The Roman centurion probably dreamed of soap and order, while Burek likely thought sitting in hot water was a bizarre form of torture. Despite the friction, a strange, grudging camaraderie starts to emerge, forged in shared discomfort and the universal language of soldierly gripes. The pay is late again. The rations hardtack, sour wine, a bit of bacon or lentils are monotonous and insufficient. The camp is muddy. Officers are idiots. These complaints transcend tribe. You share your pitiful cheese ration with Burek one evening. He shares a strip of tough, smoky dried meat that tastes like a campfire smelled. It's surprisingly good. He points to it. Sill, he says. Then points to your cheese. KCS. You nod. Progress. You learn that Burek has a wife and 2 children settled on land near Aquileia. Good land, he says, drawing a rough map in the dirt. Promise. Photos. Treaty. But his eyes darken. Roman ducks, bad man. Take more than share. Say tax. Say, anony. He uses the Latin term for military supplies, but spits it like a curse. The promise of land and integration is fraying under corruption and broken promises. The foederati aren't mindless mercenaries, they're men with families, grievances, and a keen sense of when they're being cheated. Scholarly side-eye, the integration or lack thereof of foederati is a massive historical debate. Were they becoming Romanized, adopting Latin customs and loyalty to the empire, or did they remain distinct, cohesive ethnic groups within the army, loyal primarily to their own chiefs and quick to revolt if promises were broken? Was the late Roman army a melting pot or a pressure cooker? Watching Burek's face as he talks about the corrupt ducks, seeing the shared resentment among the non-Roman troops during pay parades, the pressure cooker analogy feels uncomfortably apt. They were inside the walls now, but were they truly Roman? The answer seemed to depend entirely on whether the paymaster arrived on time and the local officials weren't thieves. One night, tensions explode. A Roman soldier accuses a Goth of stealing his good knife, a family heirloom. The Goth denies it vehemently. Shoves escalate. Friends join in. Suddenly, the camp is a snarling mess of Romans versus Goths and Franks. Shields aren't locked in formation, they're used as battering rams. Training swords are swung with real anger. You find yourself backing away, instinctively grabbing your own gear, unsure which side to join, or even if there are sides anymore. You're Roman, but Burrick, despite your language barrier and cultural chasm, shared his meat. Clodio griped with you about the rations. Are they the enemy now, or are the corrupt officers and the distant, useless Emperor Honorius the real enemies before it can escalate into a full-blown massacre? The camp commander, a weary-looking Pannonian general who has seen it all, rides in with his heavily armed Bucellarii personal guard, often barbarians themselves. He doesn't take sides. He cracks heads indiscriminately, Roman and Goth alike, restoring a sullen, bruised order. The knife is never found. Afterwards, sitting on your cot cleaning a split lip you got from a stray elbow, Roman or Gothic you don't know, Burrick tosses you a small clay jar of foul-smelling salve. He points to your lip, then to his own knuckles, bruised from punching a Roman who swung at his friend. He grunts. It might be sympathy. It might just be shared pain. He then points towards the north, where Alaric's Goths still hovered, then points around the camp, at the mixed faces illuminated by the campfires. He makes a circling motion with his finger, encompassing everyone: Romans, Goths, Franks. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't need to. The question hangs in the smoky air, thicker than the smell of cooking fires and unwashed bodies. Who are we? Who are they? The lines aren't just blurred on the map anymore. They're blurred right here, in the heart of what's left of the Roman army. You're guarding an empire that can barely define itself, alongside men who might be comrades, might be enemies, and might just be waiting for the next broken promise. The uniform doesn't fit anyone quite right anymore. And the salve on your lip stings like the future. The sullen, bruised truce in the Mediolanum camp doesn't last. Orders come down, swift and brutal, like a centurion's vine staff on a recruit's back. The simmering tensions between Romans and Foederati solved the imperial way: separate them. Your mixed numerus is broken up. The Roman elements, including you, are bundled onto creaking transport ships at Ostia. Destination not the Rhine, not the Danube. Africa. The breadbasket. The province whose grain keeps Rome breathing, whose taxes oil the creaking machinery of the Western Empire. The assignment feels less like a promotion and more like exile with a view of olive groves. Rumor says a new storm is brewing there. A storm named Genseric, leading a people called the Vandals. The name itself sounds like a promise of destruction. The voyage south is long, monotonous, and seasickness-inducing. You finally stagger down the gangplank onto the bustling docks of Carthage. The air is thick, warm, heavy with unfamiliar spices, salt, and the overwhelming scent of baking bread from 100 ovens. Carthage feels prosperous. Wide streets paved with mosaics, grand public baths steaming in the sun, villas perched on hills overlooking the sparkling Mediterranean. The granaries near the port are mountains of abundance compared to the anxious rationing of Rome. It feels like stepping into a different, wealthier world. A world blissfully unaware of Adrianople, Alaric, or the crumbling frontiers. Mainstream history nudge. Roman Africa Proconsularis, roughly modern Tunisia, was the empire's crown jewel in the west. Its fertile lands produced vast quantities of grain and olive oil. Carthage, its capital, was a magnificent city, reborn after its infamous destruction centuries earlier. It was wealthy, cultured, and utterly vital. Losing Africa wasn't just losing territory, it was like severing the main artery feeding the empire's heart. No wonder they sent reinforcements, however patchwork. But the bubble of prosperity pops quickly. You're marched not to comfortable barracks within the city walls, but to a hastily fortified camp further inland, near the provincial capital of Hippo Regius. The atmosphere here is tense, focused. The veterans talk in low tones, not about barbarians in forests, but about ships. Fast ships. And a leader who moves with terrifying speed. Your first glimpse of the enemy isn't a shield wall on a dusty plain, but a plume of smoke rising from a coastal village a day's march away. By the time your detachment arrives, panting in the North African heat, it's over. The Vandals are gone. What they leave behind is a chilling lesson in efficiency. Not just slaughter and burning, though there's plenty of that, but systematic stripping. Homes are emptied, not ransacked, but cleared. Furniture, tools, cooking pots, bolts of cloth, sacks of grain, livestock, gone. Even the bronze fittings from doors and the lead from roofs have been pried out. It's not a raid, it's a relocation project conducted by locusts. They left only the stone shells of buildings and the bodies of those who resisted. Quirky fact alert, the Vandals weren't just fierce warriors, they were logistical masters, especially at sea. Genseric understood the power of mobility. While Roman armies trudged along dusty roads, his forces moved by ship, appearing seemingly out of nowhere, striking coastal targets with devastating speed before Roman land forces could react. Think of them as the original naval special forces with a serious sideline in antique furniture removal. Their efficiency was terrifying. You're part of a force sent to reinforce Hippo Regius itself, a major port city where the famed Bishop Augustina name whispered with reverence by some, irritation by pragmatic soldiers is rallying the defense. The city walls are strong, the harbor fortified. Confidence, perhaps foolishly, returns. The Vandals are raiders, not siege engineers, right-wrong. Genseric arrives. Not with a vast, slow-moving horde, but with a disciplined force landing swiftly from their ships. They bypass strongpoints, moving with unnerving purpose. They don't immediately assault Hippo's impressive walls. Instead, they spread out, cutting roads, isolating the city, and repeating their signature move, stripping the surrounding countryside bare with methodical ruthlessness. Farms, villas, whole villages vanish into their wagons and onto their ships. They take everything useful. Food, metal, tools, people. Slaves for sale, skilled artisans for their own use, even farmers to work the lands they intend to seize. Inside Hippo, the mood shifts from defiance to grim siege mentality. You man the walls, looking out over a landscape being systematically devoured. The once bustling countryside falls silent, picked clean. The Vandals establish camps, not chaotic sprawls, but organized affairs. You see forges set up, using the looted metal. Shipwrights working on captured Roman vessels, modifying them. It's not just plunder, it's nation building in real time, fueled by Roman resources. Scholarly side-eye, the term vandalism originates from this period, synonymous with wanton destruction. But is it fair? Historians fiercely debate Genseric's motives and methods. Was he a ruthless destroyer or a pragmatic leader securing a permanent homeland for his people by any means necessary? Did the Vandals destroy for the sake of it, or primarily to cripple Roman resistance and seize vital assets? The systematic stripping you witness suggests a brutal pragmatism, taking what was needed or could be sold and denying it to the enemy. Wanton destruction maybe sometimes. Strategic asset denial. Absolutely. The line between vandalism and scorched earth logistics was blurry and covered in North African dust. One night, on watch duty overlooking the Vandal camps, you see something strange. A group of Roman soldiers, captured earlier in a skirmish, are being escorted not to a slave pen, but towards a Vandal forge. They aren't chained. They're talking to a Vandal overseer, pointing at anvils, demonstrating techniques. You mention it to a grizzled optio the next morning. He spits. Yet. Genseric smart. If you're a useful smith, carpenter, shipwright, even a decent farmer, you get a choice. Work for him, get fed, maybe even keep your family safe. Or. He draws a finger across his throat. Lot of volunteers out there hammering for the blue shields now. It's a chilling pragmatism. Why destroy skilled workers when you can press gang them into building your new kingdom? The siege of Hippo drags on. Months. Disease stalks the crowded city more lethally than Vandal arrows. Bishop Augustine dies within the walls, a symbol of fading Roman resilience. Relief attempts by the Eastern Empire are half-hearted, delayed, or intercepted by Genseric's growing fleet. You witness one such attempt, a squadron of Roman warships cautiously approaching. Before they can even get close to landing troops, a swarm of faster, more maneuverable Vandal ships darts out, not to engage directly, but to launch volleys of fire arrows and pots of Greek fire or something equally nasty and flammable. They harry, cripple a few ships, and disappear back into the coastal haze like hornets. The Roman fleet withdraws. The hope inside Hippo dies a little more. Quirky footnote: the Vandals became infamous masters of naval warfare, a rarity among barbarian groups. Under Genseric, they didn't just use ships for transport, they built a formidable pirate fleet, adopting and refining Roman and Greek naval tactics. They perfected the art of raiding coastal cities and intercepting shipping, turning the Mediterranean, once a Roman Lake Mare Nostrum, into a Vandal hunting ground. Imagine pirates with the organizational skills of a modern logistics company. Finally, starved, diseased, and with no hope of relief, Hippo Regius negotiates a surrender. The terms are pragmatic. The Vandals get the city, the harbor, the remaining supplies they haven't already stolen from the countryside. The surviving Roman garrison and civilians who wish to leave are allowed to depart, stripped of most valuables but alive. You walk out with your surviving comrades, past Vandal warriors already inventorying the city's remaining wealth: bolts of cloth, stacks of parchment from the bishop's library, crates of olive oil. Genseric himself watches from a captured Roman magistrate's chair set up in the forum. He's a small man, unassuming, but his eyes miss nothing. There's no gloating, just cold calculation. As you board a ship taking you back to Italy, what's left of it, you look back at Carthage gleaming in the distance, still untouched. But the sight brings no comfort. You've seen the blueprint. Hippo wasn't just sacked, it was processed. Stripped, utilized, absorbed. The Vandals aren't just raiders passing through. They're settlers, builders, and terrifyingly efficient ones, using Roman resources to construct their own power base on Rome's richest soil. The grain ships sailing towards Rome from Africa, with cold certainty, their days are numbered. Genseric has the ships, the ports, and now the ruthless will to control the flow. He doesn't need to burn Carthage yet. He just needs to own it. And watching the methodical plunder of Hippo, it's only a matter of time. The Vandals aren't knocking at the gate, they've already moved into the pantry and are measuring the furniture. The Western Empire's lifeline is now in the hands of history's most efficient, and least sentimental, moving company. The sour taste of Hippo Regius, the methodical stripping, the pragmatic surrender, the sight of Genseric's cold eyes cataloguing his new domain lingers as you're shipped back to the crumbling heart of the Western Empire. But there's no time for reflection. The air in Gaul vibrates with a different kind of terror, a primal dread rolling eastward like thunder. The name is whispered in markets, cursed in barracks, prayed against in churches: Attila, the scourge of God. The Hun. His shadow stretches long and dark across the provinces you once called home. You find yourself swept up not into a cohesive Roman force, but into a vast, swirling coalition assembled by Flavius Aetius, the last truly capable Roman general in the West. Aetius, the last of the Romans, is less a commander of legions now, more a master diplomat holding together a fragile alliance with spit and promises. The camp near the Catalonian plains, modern Champagne, France, is a bewildering tapestry of peoples and banners. There are Roman troops, yes, a corps of weary comitatenses and whatever local levies could be scraped together. But they are vastly outnumbered by the foederati upon whom Aetius's strategy hinges. The largest contingent, the Visigoths under their aged, fierce King Theodoric I. Their presence is a marvel of political maneuvering. Only years before, they'd been sacking Roman cities. Now, facing a common, terrifying enemy, they stand beside the eagles. You see Franks, Burgundians, Alans, bitter refugees from Attila's earlier rampages, even some Saxons. It's less a Roman army, more a desperate parliament of warriors united only by fear of the Hun. Mainstream history nudge: the Battle of the Catalonian Plains or Chalons in 451 AD was arguably the Western Empire's last major military victory and a testament to Aetius's genius. It wasn't a classic Roman battle, it was a coalition effort, a fragile alliance of diverse peoples Aetius welded together through persuasion, threats, and shared terror of Attila. The fate of the West hung on whether these traditionally fractious groups could stand together against a force that promised only annihilation. The enemy camp, glimpsed on the horizon, is different. No sprawling wagon loggers like the Goths at Adrianople. Attila's Huns travel light, fast. Their camp is a vast sea of leather tents, herds of tough steppe ponies, and an unsettling quiet compared to the noisy polyglot chaos of Aetius's coalition. They don't build siege engines, they are the siege engine. Their reputation precedes them: stories of cities razed, populations enslaved or massacred, of mounted archers who could darken the sun with arrows and heavy cavalry that could shatter any line. A palpable wave of fear ripples through the Allied camp the first time their scouts appear: small, wiry men on shaggy ponies, watching with expressionless faces before melting away like ghosts. Quirky fact alert: Attila's personal banner wasn't some fierce animal or weapon, it was a crude scarecrow made of straw and rags, mounted on a pole. To the superstitious Huns and their terrified enemies, it wasn't just a flag, it was a powerful war standard imbued with shamanic magic, designed to terrify foes and protect his army. Imagine facing the apocalypse under the command of a murderous burlap sack on a stick. Somehow, it worked. The battle begins not with a trumpet call, but with a darkening of the sky. Literally. Attila, ever the showman and tactician, holds back his main force. Instead, he unleashes his horse archers. Thousands of them. They surge forward like a locust swarm, not to engage directly, but to blanket the Allied lines in a relentless, hissing storm of arrows. It's not aimed for mass casualties immediately, it's designed to disrupt, terrify, and pin the Allied infantry in place under their shields. You're in the Visigothic section, holding your scutum over your head alongside Burrick, reunited by the strange currents of war. He grunted in recognition when you arrived. The sound is horrific: the endless thunk 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 of arrows hitting wood and earth, the screams when one finds flesh. You can't advance, you can barely see. Dust chokes the air, mixed with the acrid smell of fierce wet. Attila is softening you up, waiting. Then, the ground trembles. Not from hooves yet, but from the sheer, terrifying roar that erupts from the Hun lines. Attila himself appears, riding a dark horse before his elite bodyguard. He raises his strange scarecrow banner. The roar intensifies. And then it comes, the Hunnic heavy cavalry. These aren't the nimble horse archers. These are warriors on larger horses, clad in lamellar armor of lacquered leather and bone, wielding long lances and heavy swords. They hit the Alan contingent on the Allied left flank like a comet. The Alans, brave but outmatched by the sheer weight and ferocity of the charge, buckle, then shatter. The Huns pour through the gap, wheeling inward, threatening to roll up the entire Allied line from the side. Panic surges. This is the moment Attila lives for, the moment the enemy breaks. Scholarly side-eye, the exact location and course of the Battle of Chalons remains surprisingly contentious. Ancient sources are vague. Was it fought on a single vast plain or across a series of ridges and valleys? Did Attila really get trapped on a hill? The traditional narrative emphasizes Aetius's masterful tactics, but some historians argue the battle was a brutal, chaotic slog where the Allied victory owed as much to the ferocity of the Visigoths and the death of Attila's right-hand man, a warlord named Ardaric, as to Roman generalship. Watching the Hun lancers carve through the Alans, the master plan feels terrifyingly close to unraveling. But the coalition holds. Barely. On the right flank, King Theodoric, ignoring the arrow storm, leads his Visigoths in a ferocious countercharge against the Huns threatening to envelop the center. It's not Roman discipline, it's Gothic fury unleashed. They crash into the Hunnic cavalry with earth-shattering force. You see Theodoric, an old lion, hacking his way forward, his household warriors fighting like demons. Elsewhere, Aetius is everywhere, a whirlwind in Roman armor, rallying Roman troops, directing Frankish warriors, plugging gaps with sheer force of will. The battle degenerates into 100 savage melees across the plain. It's not lines anymore, it's knots of men screaming, dying, killing. You lose sight of Burek in the press, fighting shoulder to shoulder one moment, separated by a surge of Hunnic horsemen the next. You fight not for empire, not for Aetius, but for the man beside you and the primal need to not end up under a Hun pony's hooves. The turning point comes not with a brilliant maneuver, but with grim, desperate news filtering through the chaos. King Theodoric is dead. Unseated during the charge, trampled beneath the hooves of friend and foe alike. Instead of breaking the Visigoths, his death ignites them. His son, Thorismund, takes up the cry for vengeance. The Visigoths fight with renewed, terrifying ferocity, driving the Huns back from the center with berserk rage. Around the same time, word spreads that a detachment of Franks and Romans, led by Aetius himself, has fought its way onto a low hill where Attila had set up his command post, or maybe just gotten cornered. The Scourge of God is trapped, surrounded. The Allied forces, sensing blood, surge forward. You're part of the push towards the hill, exhaustion forgotten in the surge of desperate hope. You see the Hun wagons drawn into a tight circle, their last defense. Arrows fly thick from within. But the momentum has shifted. The Hunnic cavalry, mauled by the Visigoths and pressed on all sides, starts to lose cohesion. The terrifying aura of invincibility cracks. Attila, realizing the battle is lost, prepares for a final stand within his wagon fortress, reportedly building a pyre of saddles ready to immolate himself rather than be captured. Quirky footnote: the aftermath of the battle became a macabre tourist attraction. The carnage was so immense that decades later, travelers reported bones still littering the Catalonian plains. Local farmers allegedly plowed around massive piles of skeletons for generations. The battle didn't just decide an empire's fate, it literally reshaped the landscape with the dead. But the killing blow never falls. As dusk bleeds into the bloody plain, Aetius makes a fateful, controversial decision. He halts the assault on Attila's wagon laager. He lets Thorismund know, firmly, that pressing the attack on the trapped Huns would be too costly. The Visigoths, exhausted and mourning their king, reluctantly pull back. Attila and his surviving Huns are allowed to slip away under cover of night. The field is Aetius's. The Hun tide has been turned back. It's a victory. A costly, brutal, necessary victory. Cheers, ragged and exhausted, rise from the Allied lines. You stand amidst the carnage as the sun sets, the groans of the wounded and dying a terrible counterpoint to the distant cheers. You find Burek, alive, leaning on his notched axe, breathing heavily. He points towards the retreating dust cloud of the Huns, then at the body of a fallen Visigothic noble nearby, then finally at Aetius, silhouetted against the dying light, surveying his Pyrrhic triumph. Burek doesn't speak. He just shakes his head slowly, a gesture heavy with unspoken meaning. We won. But what did we win and what did it cost? The Visigoths lost their king. The Alans were shattered. The Roman core troops bled white. And Attila, the scourge, still lived. The victory felt less like a dawn and more like a brief, blood-red sunset before a long, uncertain night. Aetius had saved Gaul, perhaps the West, for now. But as you looked around at the sea of dead Roman, Goth, Frank, Hun, all you could think was that the Empire's last great victory smelled overwhelmingly of blood and lost chances. The monster was wounded, not slain. And the cost of this reprieve might have broken the very alliance that achieved it. The grim victory of the Catalonian plains leaves a residue of bone-deep exhaustion and uneasy alliances. The Hun horde, bled but not broken, slinks back east, a wounded beast licking its fangs. Gaul is saved, for now. But the cost hangs heavy in the air, thick as the flies over the unburied dead. You march with the remnants of Aetius's coalition back towards Italy, the camaraderie forged in the Hun storm already fraying. The Visigoths, mourning Theodoric, withdraw to Toulouse, their loyalty to Rome as brittle as dried parchment. The Franks and Burgundians eye each other warily across the Rhine. Aetius, the architect of this fragile peace, seems diminished, the lines on his face deeper, the weight of holding the crumbling West together visibly heavier. You find yourself back in Ravenna, the Western Empire's waterlogged capital. Not in the field army, but assigned to the Palatine Guard, a prestigious posting on paper, guarding the sacred person of the Emperor Valentinian III. In reality, it's a gilded cage of protocol, damp corridors, and suffocating intrigue. The air in Ravenna doesn't buzz with purpose, it drips with whispered conspiracy. The marshes outside the palace walls seem less a defense and more a metaphor for the stagnant, treacherous politics within. Valentinian III is unimpressive, petulant, easily swayed, possessing none of his mother Galla Placidia's political acumen or his father Constantius III's brief competence. He resides in a bubble of courtly rituals, surrounded by fawning eunuchs, ambitious senators, and a coterie of sycophants who feed his paranoia and vanity. The real power, the man who actually keeps the barbarians mostly at bay, manages the shreds of the treasury, and props up the imperial dignity, is Aetius. He's not just magister militum, master of soldiers anymore, he's the indispensable man. The emperor's resentful shadow. Mainstream history nudge, this toxic dynamic, a weak emperor dependent on, yet deeply resentful of, a powerful general, was a recurring poison in the late Western Empire. Aetius, despite his monumental service especially against Attila, became the ultimate victim of this pattern. Valentinian III, egged on by courtiers jealous of Aetius's power and influence, notably the wealthy senator Petronius Maximus, saw the general not as a savior, but as a threat to his own feeble authority. Your duties are mundane, standing guard in drafty hallways, escorting officials you don't recognize through labyrinthine palace wings, trying not to doze off during interminable ceremonies where Valentinian doles out titles like cheap sweets. You see Aetius often, striding through the corridors with purpose, surrounded by his own loyal officers and barbarian bodyguards Bucellarii. He looks perpetually weary, a man carrying Atlas's burden on shoulders already scarred by decades of battle. He nods curtly to guards like you, his eyes distant, already calculating the next crisis: Visigothic raids in Hispania, Vandal ships threatening Sicily, Bagauti peasant revolts in Gaul. The empire is a leaking ship, and Aetius is the only one frantically bailing. The resentment from the imperial quarters is palpable. You overhear snippets, hissed conversations in shadowed alcoves. Who does he think he is? The emperor can barely sneeze without Aetius's permission. He's worse than Stilicho. The comparison to the murdered general Stilicho hangs heavy, a dark omen. Petronius Maximus, smooth, wealthy, and endlessly ambitious, is often seen whispering urgently in Valentinian's ear. His smiles never reach his eyes. Quirky fact alert: Roman imperial assassination attempts often involved surprisingly banal methods. Poison was common, but so were clubs and daggers in crowded places. The most infamous, the murder of Emperor Commodus, involved his wrestling partner strangling him in the bath. Simplicity often trumped elaborate plots. Keep that in mind when wandering Ravenna's damp halls. One crisp autumn morning, the tension snaps. Aetius is summoned to the palace for an audience with the emperor. Not unusual. But the atmosphere feels different. Sharper. Colder. The usual courtiers are present, but their faces are masks. Petronius Maximus stands unusually close to the emperor's throne, a faint, satisfied curve to his lips. Valentinian looks nervous, fiddling with the hem of his purple chlamys. Aetius enters, alone aside from two of his Bucellarii left respectfully outside the audience chamber doors. He approaches the dais, begins the formal obeisance. You're on guard duty near the entrance, a silent witness. Then, it happens with shocking speed. Valentinian doesn't speak. Instead, he leaps up, his face contorted with sudden, inexplicable rage. He pulls a concealed dagger from beneath his robes, not a ceremonial piece, but a wicked, functional pujo, and lunges at Aetius. Traitor! Valentinian shrieks, the word echoing in the suddenly silent hall. Aetius, caught completely off guard, staggers back. He is a soldier, but unarmed in the emperor's presence. He raises an arm to block. The dagger sinks deep into his forearm, then, as Valentinian stumbles forward with the momentum, plunges again into Aetius's side. Scholarly side-eye, the immediate trigger for Valentinian's murderous rage remains debated. Was it a specific accusation from Petronius Maximus, perhaps fabricated a sudden, paranoid delusion, or simply the culmination of years of pent-up jealousy and humiliation, explosively ignited? Some sources claim Aetius was presenting financial accounts that implicated the emperor in corruption. Others suggest Valentinian believed or was told Aetius was plotting to marry his son into the imperial family. The truth died with the participants. What's clear is that the emperor personally initiated the violence, a stunning breach of all protocol and sanity. Chaos erupts. Aetius's two Bucellarii outside hear the commotion and try to force their way in, but palace guards loyal to the emperor or Petronius block the doors, weapons drawn. Inside the chamber, courtiers scream and scatter. Petronius Maximus doesn't move to help the emperor, he watches, calculating. Aetius, bleeding profusely, manages to shove the enraged Valentinian back. He stumbles towards the doors, his face ashen with shock and pain. He reaches for the handle. That's when Heraclius, the emperor's trusted chamberlain and a known enemy of Aetius, steps from behind a curtain. He doesn't hesitate. He carries a heavy ceremonial mace, used for sacrifices. He swings it with brutal force, smashing it into the back of Aetius's head. The general crumples to the marble floor without a sound. Valentinian, panting, his fine robes splattered with Aetius's blood, stares down at the body. The rage drains from his face, replaced by dawning horror and confusion. Petronius Maximus steps forward smoothly. "A tragic end for a traitor, Your Majesty," he says, his voice oily. He gestures to Heraclius and other guards. "Remove this, refuse." You stand frozen, your grip tight on your spear shaft, knuckles white. The greatest general of the age, the man who saved Gaul from Attila, lies dead at the emperor's own hand, finished off by a eunuch with a club. Not on a battlefield, but on a polished palace floor, murdered by the very empire he spent his life trying to preserve. The sheer, stupid, self-destructive waste of it chokes you. Quirky footnote: the murder weapon Valentinian's dagger became infamous. Later chroniclers, seeking symbolism, claimed it was the same dagger Aetius had once gifted the emperor years before. True or not, likely not, it cemented the act as the ultimate betrayal. Later, you're part of the grim detail tasked with cleaning the audience chamber. The blood is stubborn on the white marble. You help drag Aetius's body away, wrapped in a rough cloak. No state funeral. No honors. Just disposal. The official announcement declares him a traitor executed by the emperor's righteous hand. The news ripples outwards like a shockwave. In Gaul, Visigothic King Thorismund reportedly laughs bitterly when he hears it. In Carthage, Genseric likely allows himself a rare, cold smile. In the camps of the Foederati, men like Burich shake their heads. Trust, already frayed, snaps. As you scrub the last traces of blood from the marble, Petronius Maximus walks past, already dictating letters, consolidating power. He barely glances at the spot where the West's last pillar fell. Valentinian III hides in his chambers, reportedly trembling, haunted. The palace feels colder, emptier, profoundly unstable. Aetius was a burden, a threat, an obstacle. But he was also the keystone holding up the crumbling arch. Remove him, and the whole structure groans, cracks spreading faster than the bloodstains you just cleaned. The emperor, in a fit of paranoid rage, hasn't he just killed a man? He's signed the death warrant of the Western Empire. And you, holding a blood-stained rag in the silent, treacherous halls of Ravenna, witnessed the moment the fatal wound was self-inflicted. The barbarians at the gates might have been held back, but the real rot, the terminal decay, was right here, wearing the purple and wielding a dagger. The cloying scent of incense in Ravenna's chapel does nothing to mask the stench of fear. Valentinian III is dead. Not in battle, not by barbarian hand, but murdered in the very heart of his supposed safety, on the Campus Martius outside Rome, by two of Aetius's former bucellarii seeking vengeance for their slain master. The news reached Ravenna like a physical blow. The emperor, the feeble, paranoid figure whose own hand struck down the West's last defense, gone. The palace doesn't mourn, it scrambles. The throne, that cursed seat propped up by Aetius's weary strength and now soaked in imperial blood, stands empty. And into that vacuum strides Petronius Maximus. You witness his ascent from your Palatine guard post, now feeling more like guarding a sinking ship's rats. Maximus moves with unnerving speed and ruthless efficiency. The Senate, cowed and leaderless, is persuaded. The army factions, confused and fractured, are promised rewards. Within days, Petronius Maximus dons the purple. There's no grand acclamation, no sense of destiny fulfilled. It feels like a grubby land grab, a cynical consolidation of power by the man who likely whispered the poison that drove Valentinian to murder Aetius. His first act as emperor married Valentinian's widow, Licinia Eudoxia, a move less about romance and more about legitimizing his shaky claim by forcibly binding himself to the Theodosian dynasty. Eudoxia, daughter of the Eastern Emperor, looks at her new husband with eyes full of icy hatred and terror. Mainstream history nudge: Petronius Maximus' seizure of power in 455 AD is a master class in late Roman political opportunism. With no clear heir and the army reeling from the double blow of Aetius and Valentinian's deaths, Maximus exploited the chaos. His forced marriage to Eudoxia was a naked attempt to bolster his legitimacy by linking himself to the powerful Eastern imperial house. It was less a coronation and more a hostile takeover of a failing corporation. Rumors swirl, dark and insistent, carried by terrified servants and tight-lipped officials. Eudoxia, trapped, desperate, has done the unthinkable. She's sent a secret plea for help. Not to her relatives in Constantinople, too far, too slow. Not to the fractured remnants of the Roman army in Gaul or Italy. She's sent it south, across the treacherous sea, to Carthage. To Genseric, king of the Vandals. The man who methodically stripped Hippo Regius bare, who controls the grain that feeds Rome, whose ships rule the western Mediterranean. The plea simple: rescue her. Rescue her daughters. Deliver her from the usurper Maximus. The price unspoken, but hanging heavy in the air: come to Rome. Scholarly side-eye: the story of Eudoxia summoning Genseric is dramatic, but how true is it? Ancient sources like Procopius report it, painting Eudoxia as a tragic figure inviting the wolf into the fold. Some historians believe it, seeing it as a desperate act of a woman with no other options. Others are skeptical, suggesting it might be Vandal propaganda to justify the sack, or later Roman writers seeking a scapegoat for the disaster. Was Eudoxia truly that reckless, or was Genseric simply looking for a pretext to plunder the ultimate prize, and the rumor provided convenient cover? Standing guard in Ravenna, the distinction feels academic. The result is what matters. Panic, held at bay by sheer inertia after Valentinian's death, erupts anew in Rome. Maximus, his newfound imperial confidence evaporating faster than morning dew in the Forum, tries to rally defenses. He orders the walls manned, the gates reinforced. He makes speeches about Roman valor. But the city he tries to defend is a shadow. The grain dole is sporadic, thanks to Genseric's stranglehold on African shipments. The populace is weary, cynical, traumatized by Alaric's earlier siege and the constant drumbeat of decline. The army, what's left, is a patchwork of demoralized remnants and unreliable foederati garrisons. Where is the spirit of Scipio, of Caesar? It feels buried under centuries of decay and the recent, self-inflicted wounds. Quirky fact alert: facing imminent attack, desperate Romans resorted to ancient rituals. The Sibylline books, cryptic prophetic texts consulted in times of extreme crisis, were reportedly dusted off. The Lupercalia, the ancient fertility festival involving naked priests and goatskin whips, might even have been performed in a bid for divine intervention. Imagine trying to ward off a Vandal fleet with ritual nudity and goat blood. Spoiler: it didn't work. Genseric doesn't disappoint. He moves with the terrifying efficiency you witnessed in Africa. News arrives, a vast Vandal fleet has left Carthage. Not a raiding party. An invasion force. They land unopposed at Portus, the harbor at the mouth of the Tiber. Roman coastal defenses, neglected for years, offer no resistance. The Vandals march up the river towards Rome itself. Maximus's reign, barely 2 months old, collapses. Facing the wrath of a populace who now see him as the man who brought the Vandals down upon them, he tries to flee. He bolts from the city, disguised as a slave, heading for the gates. But the people, or perhaps his own abandoned guards, recognize him. A mob descends. You hear the reports later. Petronius Maximus, Emperor of Rome, was stoned to death near the Porta Flaminia. His body was stripped, mutilated, and thrown into the Tiber. His reign ends not with a whimper, but with the sickening crunch of rocks on bone. Quirky footnote: Maximus's fate involved cosmic irony. His desperate flight took him past the tomb of the first Christian emperor, Constantine. Some sources claim he was killed on the tomb itself, a grim punchline from the fates for a man who clawed his way to power over the corpses of better men. With Maximus gone, Rome is leaderless. Utterly defenseless, the gates are opened, not in surrender negotiated by brave senators like with Alaric, but in abject, terrified hope of avoiding total annihilation. The Vandals enter Rome not as besiegers breaking down walls, but as conquerors walking through open doors on June 2, 455 AD. You are not in Rome. You are still in Ravenna, the news arriving days later in fragmented, horrifying reports. But the descriptions paint a picture chillingly familiar from Hippo Regius, magnified 1,000-fold, systematic plunder. Genseric is true to his nature. He doesn't indulge in wanton slaughter or burning for its own sake. He has a shopping list. A very specific, very thorough shopping list. The imperial palaces, stripped bare. Gold plate, silverware, silk tapestries, furniture, even the gilded bronze tiles from the roofs loaded onto wagons. The temples, not just the pagan ones, but the Christian churches too. Altar vessels of gold and silver, jeweled reliquaries, precious candlesticks, silk altar cloths all seized. The famed Jewish temple treasures, brought to Rome by Titus centuries earlier after the sack of Jerusalem reportedly taken too, a grim echo of history. The wealthy, palaces of senators and aristocrats are methodically looted. Family heirlooms, art collections, libraries, priceless scrolls tossed aside or burned if not valuable metal or gems, personal wealth all confiscated. The people, thousands are taken captive. Not just for slavery, though that's the fate of many. Skilled artisans, craftsmen, engineers, valuable assets for Genseric's growing kingdom in Africa. And, crucially, Licinia Eudoxia and her daughters, including Eudocia, whom Genseric reportedly plans to marry to his son Honoric, fulfilling a twisted dynastic ambition. The empress who summoned the wolf is led away as part of its prize. Mainstream history nudge: this event, the sack of Rome by the Vandals in 455 AD, gave us the word vandalism. While other sacks involved violence and destruction, Genseric's operation was characterized by its cold, calculated efficiency in stripping the city of its movable wealth and skilled human capital. It wasn't mindless destruction, it was asset stripping on an epic scale, transferring the accumulated treasures of centuries from the dying West to the rising Vandal kingdom in Africa. It was the ultimate expression of Genseric's pragmatic ruthlessness. The reports speak of one poignant moment amidst the pillage. Pope Leo I, who famously confronted Attila years before, walks out to meet Genseric. There are no miraculous turnings back this time. Leo isn't negotiating for the city's salvation, it's already being consumed. He reportedly pleads for restraint, for the lives of the people, for the sanctity of the churches, a plea likely only partially heeded. Genseric, ever pragmatic, likely grants some assurances to avoid unnecessary bloodshed that would slow down the looting. But the outcome is never in doubt. The sack lasts 14 days, 14 days of methodical evisceration. When the Vandals finally depart, laden down with ships groaning under the weight of Rome's plundered glory and thousands of captives, they leave behind a city still standing, its great buildings largely intact. But it's a hollow shell. The wealth, the artifacts, the very symbols of its power and history, are gone. The spirit is broken. The message is unmistakable: the heart of the Western Empire no longer beats with its own strength, it bleeds out at the convenience of barbarian kings. The eternal city has been emptied, not just of treasure, but of the last illusions of its invincibility. The Vandals didn't just sack Rome, they performed an autopsy on the corpse of the Western Empire, removing its golden heart to display as a trophy in Carthage. And you, safe and damp, treacherous Ravenna, know that the city you once sent a pathetic gift from Antioch has now been gifted, in its plundered essence, to the man who mastered the art of taking. The final, lingering smell isn't smoke, it's the scent of a vault left open and empty. The news of Rome's systematic disembowelment by Genseric's Vandals reaches Ravenna like a cold, sickening tide. The shock isn't surprise, it's the confirmation of a dread long held. The eternal city, plundered not in a frenzy of destruction, but with the chilling efficiency of an accountant liquidating a failed business. You stand guard on Ravenna's moss-slick walls, staring not south towards the violated heart, but north and west. Because Rome's agony isn't the end. It's the signal. The signal for the final, chaotic scramble. The Western Empire isn't dying, it's shattering. Like a dropped mosaic, the grand picture fractures into 1,000 jagged pieces, each a potential kingdom. The authority that once emanated, however weakly, from Ravenna or Rome now evaporates faster than mist off the marshes. What fills the vacuum isn't barbarian hordes sweeping in en masse, but the rise of warlords Roman, barbarian, and everything in between carving out their own domains from the corpse. You're reassigned, swept up in the dwindling current of what still pretends to be the imperial army. But marching into Gaul feels less like enforcing imperial will and more like trespassing in a land rapidly forgetting Rome ever existed. The landscape tells the story: northeastern Gaul, dominated by the Salian Franks under their shrewd king Childeric. They aren't raiders anymore, they're settled. You see Frankish villages nestled comfortably alongside Roman villi, the boundaries blurring. Childeric styles himself a Roman ally, even wearing Roman-style dress sometimes, but his loyalty is to Frankish power. He collects taxes calling them something else, dispenses justice, and his warriors are the law. Roman administration a fading memory. Southwestern Gaul, the Visigothic kingdom under King Theodoric II, son of the Thorismund who fought Attila, is now a solid reality. Based in Toulouse, they control Aquitaine and are pushing into Hispania. They issue laws, the Breviary of Alaric, a codification of Roman law for their Roman subjects. Mint coins often imitating Roman types, but with the king's name, and rule with Gothic warriors and a pragmatic acceptance of Roman bureaucracy where it still functions. They aren't pretending to be Roman governors, they are kings. Southeastern Gaul, the Burgundians have established their realm around Lugdunum, Lyon and Geneva. Like the Visigoths, they adopted much Roman law and administration, blending it with their own customs. Their kings speak Latin, patronize Christian churches though often Arian Christian, a point of friction, and rule firmly over a mixed population. Your hometown, Lugdunum, is now Burgundian territory. The concept feels alien, jarring. Hispania, a patchwork quilt of chaos. Suebi in the northwest Galicia. Visigoths pushing in from the northeast. Local Hispano-Roman warlords clinging to pockets of power in the south and east, and the ever-present fear of Vandal raids from Africa, though Genseric seems focused on consolidating his stolen Mediterranean empire. Roman control non-existent. It's a free-for-all. Britannia, gone. Utterly. Roman legions withdrew decades ago to deal with continental crises. What remains is a fierce struggle for survival among Romano-Britons, Picts from the north, Scots from Ireland Scoti, and the newly arriving Angles and Saxons carving out coastal kingdoms. The villas are crumbling, the cities abandoned or repurposed as fortified strongholds. The dream of Rome is a ghost story told by bards. Mainstream history nudge. This fragmentation is often called the Barbarian Kingdoms period. But it wasn't a sudden barbarian takeover. It was a gradual, messy process of localization and power consolidation. Roman infrastructure, law, and even identity persisted, especially under groups like the Visigoths and Burgundians who actively sought to use Roman systems to govern their mixed populations. The fall of Rome wasn't a single event, it was the crystallization of these new political entities on former imperial soil. Your unit, nominally loyal to whatever puppet emperor currently shivers in Ravenna, more on that soon, is tasked with, well, it's unclear. Maintaining order, whose order you patrol roads that are now Burgundian or Frankish, passing checkpoints manned by warriors who speak Germanic tongues and demand tolls in the name of their king, not the emperor. You try to collect imperial taxes from villages whose headman shrugs and points to the Frankish Gau leader or Burgundian comes who already took their share. The imperial edicts you carry feel like meaningless scraps of parchment. Quirky fact alert: the Burgundians developed a unique legal tradition blending Germanic custom and Roman law. One famous clause in their law of Gundobad stipulated different warguild man price payments based on social status and even hair length. A free Burgundian with long hair, a mark of nobility, was worth significantly more than a shorn one or a Roman. Talk about a bad hair day having literal consequences. You witness a skirmish near Arlet Alls. Not Romans versus barbarians, but Visigoths clashing with Burgundians over disputed territory, former Roman territory. The tactics, the shouts, the armor, it's a confusing mix of Roman discipline and Germanic ferocity. You and your comrades watch from a nearby hill, ordered not to intervene. Who would you even fight for? The concept of a unified Roman Gaul feels like a fairy tale told to children. The battle is brutal, short, and inconclusive. Afterwards, both sides retreat, licking wounds, solidifying their borders. The land itself seems to shrug off the bloodshed, accepting its new masters. The most profound change isn't on the battlefield, but in the faces of the people. In a Gallo-Roman town now under Frankish sway, you stop at a tavern. The owner, an old man whose Latin is thick with a Gallic accent, pours your wine. "Where you headed, soldier?" he asks, eyeing your faded Roman tunic. "Orders to Narbo," you reply. "Imperial garrison." He barks a laugh, dry and humorless. "Imperial in Narbo, that's Visigoth country now, lad. Good luck finding an imperial garrison there. Last Roman official I saw here ran off to Arlet, and that was before the Burgundians got frisky." He leans closer, lowering his voice. "Truth is, son, it doesn't matter whose eagle's on the flagpole anymore. Frank, Goth, Burgundian, they all want their taxes. They all want men for their warbands. Life goes on. The crops need planting, the wine needs making. Rome," he gestures vaguely south, towards distant Italy. "That's just a place where rich men in Ravenna play dress up and get other men killed." Scholarly side-eye: the transition of identity for ordinary Romans in these new kingdoms is a huge debate. Did they still consider themselves Roman? Did they adopt a new, hybrid identity, Gallo-Roman, Hispano-Roman, or did they simply shift allegiance to the new local power that provided security and order? The tavern keeper's weary pragmatism suggests survival trumped ideology. The grand narrative of empire mattered less than who collected the taxes and kept the local bandits in check. Romanita's Roman identity wasn't erased. It was diluted, adapted, and often subsumed by the need to navigate a fractured world. Marching away from the tavern, the reality sinks in. You're not a soldier of Rome guarding its provinces. You're a mercenary in a shrinking, irrelevant army, traversing a landscape where new kingdoms are hardening like cooling lava. The names on the map: Aquitaine, Burgundy, Francia aren't provinces anymore, they're nascent nations. The eagles on your standards feel like relics, symbols of a ghost that no longer haunts these lands. The empire isn't being conquered, it's being replaced, piece by piece, by the very forces it once hired to defend its borders. You're not fighting barbarians, you're witnessing the birth pangs of a new Europe, messy, violent, and utterly indifferent to the faded glory of Ravenna. The West is gone. What remains is the map, redrawn by the swords of warlords and the weary acceptance of peasants just trying to get through the next harvest. And your place in it feels smaller, more precarious, with every mile you march through lands that no longer know your emperor's name. The vast, fragmented map of Gaul, Hispania, and Britannia, now a patchwork of Frankish, Visigothic, Burgundian, and Suebic kingdoms, feels impossibly distant as you are recalled to Ravenna. Not to glory, not to purpose, but back into the damp, suffocating embrace of the imperial capital. The air here isn't filled with the sounds of new kingdoms being forged, it's thick with the quiet, desperate wheeze of a dying beast. The Western Empire isn't shattering anymore, it's reduced to a flickering ember in the marshes. And the man fanning that ember, not to revive it, but to control its dim, pathetic light, is Ricimer. You arrive to find Ravenna changed. The aura of imperial power, however faded, has curdled into something else, a shadow court. The great palaces feel emptier, damper, haunted. The real power doesn't reside on the throne, it resides in the headquarters of the Magister Militum, Ricimer. And Ricimer is everywhere and nowhere. He is a Suebic and Gothic nobleman by birth, a product of the very foederati system that sustained and now consumed the empire. But he is also a Roman general, baptized Christian, albeit Arian Christian, a point of friction, fluent in Latin, and a master of the labyrinthine politics that have become the empire's last export. He holds no imperial title, wears no purple. Instead, he wears the practical mail of a soldier and wields the real power, control of the only meaningful military force left in Italy, a patchwork army loyal primarily to him, and to the gold he can still scrape together. Mainstream history nudge. Ricimer's reign, roughly 456 to 472 AD, exemplifies the Shadow Emperor phase of the Western Empire's endgame. Unable or unwilling to seize the throne himself, his barbarian birth made him unacceptable to the Roman aristocracy and the Eastern Emperor. He instead became the ultimate kingmaker. He appointed, manipulated, and discarded a series of puppet emperors, ensuring they posed no threat to his own dominance, while he tried, with diminishing returns, to hold Italy together against Vandals, Visigoths, and internal revolts. Your new posting is grimly appropriate, guarding the imperial palace. But the figure you see shuffling through its echoing halls isn't a ruler, it's Libius Severus, the current occupant of the purple. A nonentity plucked from obscurity by Ricimer. Severus looks perpetually bewildered, a rabbit caught in the gaze of a patient wolf. He holds audiences, signs documents prepared by Ricimer's secretaries, performs the rituals. But his eyes dart constantly towards Ricimer or Ricimer's trusted lieutenants, seeking silent approval for every nod, every word. The Senate, what's left of it, pays him hollow homage. Everyone knows where true authority lies. Quirky fact alert: despite the empire's terminal decline, the imperial bureaucracy in Ravenna persisted with astonishing, almost absurd, tenacity. Officials still drafted elaborate decrees, collected dwindling taxes where they could, and maintained complex records, even as the territory they nominally governed shrank to little more than Italy itself. It was administration for administration's sake, a ghostly echo of past grandeur. Think of it as rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, while the band plays soggy hymns in the background. You see Ricimer often. He's not tall, but radiates a contained, dangerous energy. His eyes are sharp, missing nothing. He moves with the economical grace of a seasoned soldier, but his conversations are laced with the subtle menace of a politician. He holds court not on a throne, but in the military headquarters, surrounded by his loyal Bucellarii, a mix of Goths, Suebi, and hardened Roman veterans who know which side their bread is buttered on. Senators approach him with deference bordering on fear, seeking favors, appointments, or simply survival. Ricimer grants or denies with a curt word, a flick of his hand. The real business of the empire negotiating with Genseric's Vandals who periodically raid the Italian coast, fending off Visigothic encroachments in Gaul, begging for money or troops from the Eastern Emperor in Constantinople is conducted here, by Ricimer and his hand-picked men. The imperial palace is just the set dressing. One day, you witness the mechanics of the shadow rule firsthand. A delegation arrives from Gaul, not from the Visigothic king, but from a group of beleaguered Gallo-Roman aristocrats still clinging to the fiction of imperial authority. They plead for help against Visigothic aggression. Libius Severus receives them in the audience chamber, sitting stiffly on the throne. He listens, nods sympathetically, promises vaguely to consider the matter with the utmost gravity. It's a performance. As soon as the delegation is ushered out, Ricimer steps from an alcove where he'd been observing unseen. Severus practically wilts. Well, Ricimer asks, his voice low, devoid of deference. They need aid, Magister Militum, Severus stammers. The Visigoths press them hard. Ricimer sighs, a sound like rusted hinges. Aid with what? The grain ships from Africa are Genseric's toys. The taxes from Gaul flow to Uric and Toulouse, not our coffers. The Eastern Emperor sends prayers, not legions. He walks towards a large, faded map on the wall. Tell them the Emperor is deeply concerned and is marshalling imperial resources. He taps a spot on the map far from Gaul. Marshalling. A useful word. Means nothing, implies everything. Scholarly side-eye, Ricimer's effectiveness is hotly debated. Was he a skilled operator desperately trying to salvage the unsalvageable with the only tools left, intrigue and a shrinking army, or was he a cynical opportunist, prolonging the empire's death throes solely to maintain his own power, even if it meant sacrificing capable emperors like Majorian, whom he had killed? Did he genuinely believe in any version of Rome, or was he just playing the game until the music stopped, watching him manipulate Severus and dismiss the Gallic plea? It's hard to see idealism. It looks like survival, pure and simple. The fragility of Ricimer's control is exposed brutally a few months later. Libius Severus, the harmless puppet, dies. Poison, illness, old age induced by sheer existential dread. No one investigates too closely. The throne is empty again. Ricimer doesn't skip a beat. He needs a new figurehead, preferably one with a slightly better pedigree to appease the Eastern Emperor and the remaining Roman elite. His choice falls on Anicius Olybrius, a senator with distant ties to the Valentinian dynasty, and crucially, married to Valentinian III's younger daughter, Placidia. It's another dynastic fig leaf. But getting Olybrius requires Eastern Emperor Leo I's approval. Ricimer sends envoys to Constantinople. While waiting, he can't leave the throne empty. So, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out Glycerius, an obscure army officer, possibly one of Ricimer's own domestici staff officers. The appointment is so blatant, so devoid of any pretense, it borders on farce. Glycerius is crowned emperor. He looks as surprised as anyone. Quirky footnote: Glycerius's brief reign is so obscure that even the date of his accession is fuzzy. Some sources suggest Ricimer might have initially proposed him to Constantinople before Olybrius, only to be rejected. Others paint him as a pure placeholder. His main achievement possibly bribing some Ostrogothic mercenaries not to raid Italy. The bar for imperial accomplishment had sunk very low. You stand guard as Glycerius goes through the motions. The Senate goes through the motions. Ricimer pulls the strings. The charade is thin, fraying at the edges. Whispers turn to open snickers in the taverns. How long can this last? The answer comes sooner than expected. Ricimer's envoys return from Constantinople. Leo I, unimpressed with Glycerius and wary of Ricimer's power, has approved Olybrius, and sent him west with an eastern general, Julius Nepos, and a small force. Leo isn't just sending an emperor, he's sending a challenge to Ricimer's dominance. Ricimer faces a choice. Fight the eastern nominee, risking civil war he can ill afford, or discard Glycerius like a used rag and embrace Olybrius. You see the calculation in his eyes. No sentiment. Only cold pragmatism. Glycerius, the accidental emperor, is deposed without a murmur. He's packed off to become a bishop in Salona, a traditional retirement home for inconvenient ex-emperors. Olybrius arrives, escorted by Nepos. He's crowned. Ricimer greets him with the respect due to an imperial pawn. The names change: Severus, Glycerius, now Olybrius, but the man behind the curtain remains the same. The power resides not in the purple robe, but in the worn leather cuirass and the network of loyal blades Ricimer commands. Standing guard as Olybrius performs his first ceremonial duties, you look past the new figurehead to Ricimer, standing slightly to the side, watching, always watching. The palace feels less like a seat of empire and more like a stage for a macabre puppet show. The puppets are swapped when they fray or displease the puppeteer. The audience, the people of Italy, the barbarian kings, the Eastern Emperor watches with weary cynicism or predatory interest. The Western Empire has become a tragicomedy directed by a barbarian general, performed in a sinking city, for an empire that exists only in the flickering candlelight of Ricimer's headquarters. The only question left is not if the final curtain falls, but who will cut the last string holding up the last puppet. And Ricimer's hand, holding the shears, looks steady. For now. The damp rot of Ravenna's shadow court has seeped into your bones. Ricimer, the barbarian kingmaker who pulled the strings behind Severus, Glycerius, and Olybrius, is dead. Gone not in battle, but felled by a fever in 472 AD, his relentless pragmatism finally outmaneuvered by mortality. His death leaves a vacuum even more profound than the imperial throne he manipulated. The intricate web of loyalty, fear, and patronage he wove over Italy snaps. The puppets are left dangling. Olybrius, Ricimer's last appointed emperor, follows him to the grave within months. The stage is empty, shrouded in mist. Who will pull the strings now? The Eastern Emperor in Constantinople, Zeno, sees an opportunity to reassert control over the Western carcass. He sends his candidate, Julius Nepos, the same general who had escorted Olybrius west years earlier. Nepos arrives in Ravenna in 474 AD with a modest eastern force. He is capable, experienced, and crucially, Zeno's man. He is crowned Emperor of the West. There is a flicker, a last gasp of potential. Maybe, just maybe, with Eastern backing. But the flicker dies almost instantly. Nepos is capable, which means he is a threat. He tries to assert actual authority, to reform, to push back against the entrenched interests of the Italian aristocracy and the powerful, restless barbarian mercenaries who are the Roman army. This doesn't sit well. Within a year, Nepos is overthrown not by a barbarian king, but by his own magister militum, Orestes. Orestes is a fascinating figure. A Roman aristocrat, born in Pannonia, steeped in Roman tradition. But his career path is pure late empire. He served Attila the Hun as a secretary, navigating the perilous Hun court, before switching allegiance back to Rome after Attila's death. He is the ultimate survivor, a man who understands both the Roman world and the barbarian power that now underpins it. He drives Nepos out of Italy in 475 AD. Nepos flees back to Dalmatia, where he clings to the title of Western Emperor, ruling a rump state, ignored by everyone except Zeno's diplomats. Mainstream history nudge, the final years are a blur of claimants. Nepos in Dalmatia technically remained the legitimate Western emperor in the eyes of Constantinople until his death in 480 AD. But in Italy, Orestes held the power. Instead of declaring himself emperor, perhaps wary of Eastern reprisal or lacking the bloodline, Orestes does something unprecedented. He places his 10-year-old son, Romulus, on the throne in late 475 AD. While likely to be the ultimate puppet master, ruling through his malleable child. The boy is given the imperial name Augustus, but history, with crushing irony, will remember him only by the diminutive Romulus Augustulus, Little Romulus or Little Augustus. The founder and the first emperor, reduced to a pathetic echo. You are reassigned to the palace guard in Ravenna once more. The figure you now guard is not a weary general, not a bewildered senator, but a child. Romulus Augustulus sits on the oversized throne, his feet dangling, struggling to stay awake during tedious ceremonies. His purple chlamys looks like a costume borrowed from a theater troupe. Orestes stands beside him, or more often, behind him, a tall, stern presence whispering instructions, making decisions, signing decrees in the boy's name. The Senate pays its hollow respects. The palace bureaucracy churns out documents stamped with the child emperor's name. It's a grotesque parody, the final, absurd reduction of the imperial dignity. Quirky fact alert, despite his pitiful reign, Romulus Augustulus was likely given a relatively thorough Roman education by his father. He would have learned rhetoric, history including the deeds of his namesake, Romulus, and the theoretical duties of an emperor, lessons delivered while his father's soldiers decided the fate of his non-existent empire. Imagine learning statecraft while your kingdom shrinks to a single waterlogged city. The charade, however, is built on sand. Orestes, ruling in his son's name, faces the same impossible problem as Ricimer and every general before him, paying the army. And the army in Italy isn't Roman. It's a collection of Heruli, Syrian, and Rugian mercenaries under their own chieftains. These men weren't fighting for the abstract ideal of Rome, they fought for land, for settlement, for a place to call their own within the empire they defended. They'd been promised land grants hospitalitas, a third of the land in Italy, according to some sources. Orestes, perhaps believing the fiction of imperial restoration was more important, perhaps bowing to pressure from the terrified Italian landowners who still held some sway, refuses. He reneges on the promise. The reaction is swift and terminal. The barbarian foederati don't petition the Senate. They don't appeal to little Romulus. They turn to their most formidable leader, Odoacer, a chieftain of the Syrians. Odoacer isn't a kingmaker, he is a soldier. Ruthlessly pragmatic, respected by the rank and file. He listens to their grievances, the broken promise, the worthless pay in increasingly dubious coin, the contempt they feel from the Romans they protect. He sees an opportunity. In late August 476 AD, Odoacer's forces, representing the disgruntled barbarian army, march on Ravenna. Not a foreign invasion. An internal mutiny by the empire's own defenders. Orestes scrambles to raise loyal troops. Who is loyal? The Roman aristocracy hides behind their villas. The remnants of the Italian peasant levies are demoralized and scattered. Orestes makes a stand near Piacenza. It's brief, desperate, and futile. Orestes is captured. Odoacer, showing a chilling pragmatism that would become his hallmark, orders his execution. Immediately. No trial. No imperial pardon. Orestes, the Roman aristocrat who served Attila and placed his son on the throne, is gone. Scholarly side-eye, Odoacer's background is surprisingly murky. Was he primarily Syrian Heruli or a mix? His rise highlights the fluidity and mixed nature of the late Roman military. His motivation wasn't necessarily to destroy the empire, but to secure a permanent homeland for his men within its collapsing structure. The refusal of land was the spark, the potential for power was the fuel. With Orestes dead, the path to Ravenna is open. Odoacer's troops march unopposed into the marshy capital. There is no grand battle at the gates, no heroic last stand. The city, accustomed to being ruled by barbarian generals, simply yields. You stand guard at the palace, not knowing whether to resist or surrender. The orders never come. The palace officials vanish. The remaining guards look at each other, then slowly lower their weapons as Odoacer's seasoned warriors enter the courtyard. Odoacer himself strides into the throne room. He doesn't wear imperial purple. He wears the practical garb of a Germanic warlord, though perhaps with finer Roman-made mail. His eyes sweep the room, dismissing the cowering senators, the terrified clerks. They land on the throne. On the small boy sitting there, wide-eyed with terror, his purple cloak looking absurdly large. The room holds its breath. Will he kill the child, usurp the throne, declare himself king? Odoacer walks towards the throne. He doesn't bow. He looks down at Romulus Augustulus. There's no malice in his gaze, only cold assessment. Then, he speaks, his Latin accented but clear. You are too young to bear such burdens, boy. And this? He gestures vaguely at the palace, the city, the crumbling concept of the Western Empire. This is no longer yours to bear. He doesn't seize the throne. He doesn't declare himself emperor. He does something far more profound. He decommissions it. He orders the child deposed. Gently, almost respectfully, soldiers, perhaps men you once served alongside, help the trembling Romulus down from the throne. The imperial purple is removed. Scholarly side-eye, the exact fate of Romulus Augustulus is uncertain but generally accepted as benign. Odoacer, showing shrewdness and perhaps a flicker of Roman-influenced sentiment, didn't harm him. He was pensioned off, granted a comfortable estate, a villa in Campania near Naples, and a generous income. Some sources suggest he lived into old age, a forgotten relic of a vanished world, possibly even founding a monastery. His peaceful retirement stands in stark contrast to the brutal ends of so many late emperors. But Odoacer isn't finished. He knows symbols matter. He knows Constantinople still watches. He orders the imperial regalia, the purple robes, the diadem, the scepter, the official seal carefully packed. He composes a letter to the Eastern Emperor Zeno. It's just the Western Empire, as a separate entity, is unnecessary. There is only one Roman emperor, Zeno in Constantinople. Odoacer humbly requests that Zeno grant him the title of patrician, a high Roman honorific, often held by powerful generals like Aetius and Ricimer, and entrust him with the governance of Italy. He will rule as Zeno's viceroy. He sends the imperial regalia east, a physical surrender of the Western throne. Quirky footnote: the date often cited for the fall of the West is September 4, 476 AD, when Odoacer deposed Romulus. But contemporaries didn't see it as a cataclysm. Life in Italy continued. Odoacer ruled effectively for over a decade, maintaining Roman law and administration. The fall was a slow fade, and this was just the final administrative transfer. It was less an explosion and more like turning off the lights in an already abandoned room. You watch as the chest containing the symbols of Western imperial power is sealed. You see the Eastern envoys prepare to depart, carrying Odoacer's letter and the physical remnants of a 1,000-year legacy. Romulus Augustulus is led away, bewildered, a child relieved of a crown he never understood. The throne room is empty. Orestes is dead. Ricimer is dust. Nepos clings to a title in Dalmatia. The line of Western emperors, stretching back to Augustus, ends not with a bang, but with the quiet shuffling of a small boy's feet on marble and the clink of packed regalia. Odoacer turns to the assembled remnants of the court, the soldiers, the people of Ravenna. He doesn't claim an empire. He claims a job. I will govern Italy, he states, his voice firm. In the name of the Emperor Zeno. Order will be maintained. The land grants promised to the soldiers will be honored. It's a statement of fact, not ambition. The Western Roman Empire isn't conquered, it's administratively dissolved. The title ceases to exist. The territory becomes a province again, ruled by a barbarian patrician appointed by the East. The long, slow unraveling that began with the Tetrarchy, accelerated by Adrianople and the sack of Rome, poisoned by assassinations and puppet shows, finally reaches its quiet, bureaucratic conclusion. The eagle standard isn't torn down, it's simply folded and put away. And you, guarding an empty throne in a city of mists, realize you're no longer a soldier of the Western Empire. That entity is gone. You're just a man in a guard tunic, standing in the echoing silence after the final, whispered act of dissolution. The empire didn't fall, it signed itself out of existence. The damp, echoing silence of Ravenna's empty throne room fades, replaced by the vibrant, overwhelming hum of Constantinople. The journey east felt less like travel and more like slipping between worlds. You arrive not as a soldier of a vanished empire, but as a refugee carrying only the fading memories of crumbling palisades, murdered generals, and child emperors. Stepping onto the keys of the Golden Horn, the scale and vitality of the eastern capital hit you like a physical wave. The air is thick with a dozen languages, Greek predominating, but also Latin, Syriac, Coptic, Armenian, the guttural tones of traders from the steppes, the musical lilt of Egyptians. Ships from Alexandria disgorge mountains of Egyptian grain, ensuring the city's belly is full, a stark contrast to the desperate bread lines of Rome you once knew. Warehouses bulge with silks from China, spices from India, furs from the north. The Theodosian walls loom inland, dwarfing even Aurelian's efforts in Rome, a triple line of impregnable stone that seems to shrug off any threat. Here, amidst the ordered chaos of markets and the majestic sweep of the Hagia Sophia. Justinian's masterpiece still decades in the future, but the earlier church still inspires awe. The news from Italy feels distant, almost unreal. Mainstream history nudge. This is the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire at its resilient peak in the late 5th century. While the West collapsed, Constantinople thrived. Its strategic location, formidable defenses, robust economy fueled by the rich East and control of key trade routes, and more stable political structure allowed it to endure. The East didn't just survive the fall of the West, it barely seemed to notice the patient expiring in the next room. You find work unloading grain sacks on the bustling docks. The talk among the stevedores isn't of Odoacer or Romulus Augustulus. It's of the latest chariot races in the hippodrome, the theological debates raging about the nature of Christ, a passionate pastime here, or the price of Anatolian wool. The West, it's a topic met with shrugs or pragmatic sighs. Heard about Italy, you venture to a grizzled dock foreman one day, wiping sweat from your brow. Italy, he spits a sunflower seed husk into the shimmering water. That mess soda, what's it running things now, good luck to him. As long as the grain tax from Egypt keeps coming and the Persians stay on their side of the border. He gestures dismissively towards the distant Theodosian walls. The city's what matters. The real Rome is here. His words echo a growing sentiment. Romania, the Roman world had shifted its axis. Constantinople wasn't the new Rome, it was Rome. Quirky fact alert. Constantinople's urban infrastructure was leagues ahead of late Western cities. It boasted massive underground cisterns like the Basilica cistern, supported by forests of columns, complex aqueducts bringing fresh water from miles away, and even a sophisticated system of street lighting in major thoroughfares. Imagine walking well-lit, cleanish streets at night while Rome or Ravenna drowned in darkness and sewage. The East invested in its future, the West mortgaged its past. News does filter through, carried by merchants or official dispatches read aloud in the August Ion Square. Odoacer rules Italy competently, acknowledging Emperor Zeno in Constantinople as his overlord, sending the occasional symbolic tribute. He styles himself Rex Italii, King of Italy, a title that would have been unthinkable treason a generation ago, but now merely describes reality. In Dalmatia, the ghost Emperor Julius Nepos clings on until his assassination in 480 AD. Zeno in Constantinople briefly considers reclaiming the West, but the logistics are daunting, the Persian threat ever present, and Odoacer seems a manageable viceroy. The official line from the Great Palace is one of continuity. There is only one Roman Empire, ruled from Constantinople. The West is merely, temporarily administered differently. The mental gymnastics are impressive. Years pass. You build a life on the margins of the great city. You see the immense hippodrome roar with passion for the blues or greens. You witness the solemn processions of the patriarch. You feel the city shudder when earthquakes strike, only to rebuild with relentless energy. The rhythm of the East is different, more complex, more enduring. Then, a new emperor ascends, Justinian I energy crackles around him. He dreams not just of maintaining, but of restoring. His gaze turns west, not with nostalgia, but with the cold calculation of a man who sees fractured kingdoms as opportunities. His brilliant, ruthless general Belisarius lands in North Africa in 533 AD. The Vandal kingdom, grown fat and complacent on Rome's plundered wealth, collapses almost overnight. Scholarly side-eye, Justinian's reconquest is a massive historical pivot. Was it a glorious restoration of Roman glory, a costly, doomed vanity project that overextended the Eastern Empire, or a necessary securing of flanks against Persia? Historians debate fiercely. His success in Africa, an initial lightning campaign in Italy retaking Rome in 536 AD. showed stunning capability. But the long, brutal Gothic war that followed drained the East and left Italy ravaged, demonstrating the immense difficulty of stitching the torn fabric of the West back together. The dream of reunification flickered brightly, then guttered out. You stand on the docks as ships return from Carthage laden not just with grain, but with tales of Belisarius' victories and rumors of treasures recovered from the Vandals, perhaps even some of the loot Genseric took from Rome decades before. There's a buzz in the city, a sense of resurgent power. You see the colossal project of the new Hagia Sophia rising, a statement in stone and light. Justinian strides through the streets, his ambition a tangible force. For a moment, the ghost of the unified empire seems to stir. But watching the wounded veterans disembark from the Italian campaigns years later, hearing whispers of plague stalking the provinces drained by endless war, and feeling the ever-present tension of the Persian frontier, the old soldier in you recognizes the pattern. Ambition outstripping reach. The cost of glory measured in blood and empty coffers. The East is mighty, yes. Resilient, undoubtedly. But the West you knew is gone. Not waiting to be reclaimed, but transformed into something new. Frankish Gaul, Visigothic Spain, the patchwork of Italy under Ostrogoths, then Byzantines, then Lombards. Justinian's campaigns feel less like a true restoration and more like a brilliant, fleeting echo of a melody that had already ended. He rebuilds the aqueduct of Valens and strengthens the Theodosian walls, pouring resources into the city's bones, ensuring this Rome endures. The focus remains here, on the Bosporus, where the real pulse of the Roman world now beats, strong and defiant, gazing east and south, building its own eternal story on foundations the West could no longer sustain. The light from the West has gone out, but here, on the shores of the Propontis, the lantern burns brighter than ever. The rhythmic sigh of the waves against the Constantinopolitan seawall blends with the distant city hum, softening now, like breath easing into sleep. The sharp edges of history, the clang of swords on the Rhine, the desperate shouts at Adrianople, the cold clink of Vandal-looted gold, the hollow silence of Ravenna's throne room, they all recede, dissolving into the gentle haze of memory. You've walked with legions and fled with refugees, witnessed empires fracture and kingdoms rise from the dust. The grand narratives, the clashes of emperors and kings, blur like frescoes viewed through sea mist. Feel the solid weight of the present moment, the cool linen beneath you, the steady rhythm of your own breath, the soft, familiar drone of the fan, a constant companion through these journeys. It's the sound of now, a gentle anchor in the vast sea of time. The struggles of Rome, East and West, the ambitions of Justinian, the slow turning of ages, they become like stories etched on distant stars, beautiful, profound, but no longer demanding your vigil. Let the images soften further, the golden glow of the Hagia Sophia's lamps not as a beacon of power, but as a warm, welcoming hearth in the night, the Theodosian walls not as grim ramparts, but as silent, ancient guardians watching over dreams. The currents of the Bosporus carry away the echoes of marching feet, leaving only the lullaby of water meeting stone. The weight of centuries lifts, replaced by the comforting lightness of the night air. You've journeyed far, walked through the twilight of an age, and now, the quiet harbor of sleep beckons. The fan's whisper merges with the sigh of history settling into rest, a soft, endless murmur against the silence. The world turns, empires rise and fall like waves, but here, now, there is only this gentle darkness, this profound peace. The story is told, the echoes fade, let go, drift, sleep.